Bite your tongue. You must have heard of our late night meetings, a small crowd here.
Right, late, that should be late.
People said midnight, that's too
All ready
much.
to go, I had it all running.
Yeah, just went to sleep.
Let's see where this goes.
All right, seeing that it's 7:01, I'd like to call this October 1st, 2018 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
just like to announce that Chelmsford Telemedia is broadcasting this meeting tonight and recording it for later broadcast. Is there anyone else here who's recording the meeting tonight? No one? Thank you. We have one public service announcement from the Board of Health about the townwide flu, but is anyone here from the Board of Health tonight? I think they're having a meeting tonight. Perhaps you could read that, Ken?
Sure. The Chelmsford Board of Health is sponsoring flu clinics. Get your flu vaccine today. They're going to be holding the clinics at the Chelmsford Senior Center, 75 Groton Road in North Chelmsford on Wednesday, October 10th from 3:30 to 7 p.m. That's for age 65 and older, and from 4:30 to 7 p.m. for those 3 years and older. November 1st, Thursday, from 4 to 7 p.m., ages 3 and older. Everyone, regardless of age, must bring all health insurance cards. If you have any questions, you can reach the Board of Health at 978-250-5241.
Thank you. And usually they have a great turnout there, but they have a very efficient operation, and people move through there very quickly. We have open session tonight. If anyone would like to speak on any particular issue in the town, anyone like to speak tonight? No one? All right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'd like to move that maybe we can get the get the school committee out of the way.
I think they're coming. Sure. Where?
They're like 7th or 8th on the agenda. They're all
Sure.
here.
Sure.
Huh? It's just a,
All right, well, let me just jump ahead to reports and presentations for the Neshoba Valley Technical High School District School Committee request for special municipal employee status. Anyone would like to speak directly about it?
Thank you. I'm Lawrence McDonald, one of your representatives on the Neshoba Tech School Committee. Don Ayer and Dick DeFreitas, who are also representatives on the Neshoba Tech School Committee, are here. Maria Carafellis regrets she couldn't make it. The issue before us is to reclassify the positions of Chelmsford representatives on the Neshoba Tech School Committee as what is known as special municipal employees, and this is a classification to somewhat soften the conflict of interest. As you know, as a regional school committee, we have 8 sending towns, and as the law currently exists, our positions would be in conflict if, for example, if an electrician from Chelmsford was also a part-time building inspector in air, they couldn't serve on the Neshoba Tech School Committee without being in conflict. Or a teacher from Chelmsford who was teaching in Groton couldn't serve on the Neshoba Tech School Committee. Creating these positions as special municipal employees doesn't give us as individuals any benefit. We're still volunteers, which we're happy to be. No compensation, no insurance, none of that. But what it does is it opens up the pool of potential volunteers who could serve on the committee. And if in future you saw a conflict of interest, well, you have the ultimate authority in that you don't have to vote yes on any particular candidate who puts their name forward. You can always vote no. But how this helps us is we have members of our committee from other communities who will have to resign from our board if we're not able to get the designation.
So will all the communities have to sign off on it?
Yes, that's an excellent question. All of the communities will have to sign off on it. Thus far, 4 have. I believe another one is voting either tonight or next week. It just hasn't gotten on everybody's agenda. It's been no problem in the ones that it's gone before.
Paul, has town council needed to look at this? Is this fairly straightforward?
Well, I haven't sent it to town council, because I really didn't know what, the letter doesn't describe why now and what the particular conflicts exist now that we could advise the board on. We heard Lawrence just describe the basis for the request, but I don't have, and I haven't been able to provide to council any particulars in terms of, well, what is it? Is somebody looking to do a contract with the school? Is somebody who's employed? So the short answer is no. This is a provision under the State Ethics Commission in terms of a designation of special municipal employees, which has arisen in the town side in the past. And the town generally, in almost all circumstances, has not designated special municipal employee status on town employees and
How do you
town
feel
boards and
about this,
officials.
I do not support the designation, because, and quite frankly, especially in this situation, because it's not for a particular individual, it is for the entire committee, for the entire board. And it really doesn't, if it were limited to one person and one particular circumstance, then, you know, I would be more amenable to it, but it doesn't. I mean, once you give somebody the special municipal designation, any member of that board can go and represent anybody at any of the other communities or the community that they're from before any other boards. It really overrides a lot of the what's included in the ethics that we agree to when we get elected and appointed to positions.
How about you, Ken? Good.
Oh, I'm sorry, but what Pat was saying, we're still bound by ethics. We still, if we had a conflict, we would have to alert the town and the school district about our conflict, and the designation is revocable. The Board of Selectmen could, down the road, revoke it if there was a problem. But on a day-to-day basis, I don't think it really changes anything for the 4 of us.
That's absolutely true. It probably doesn't change anything for the 4 of you, but it changes everything for the other 15 members or whatever of the committee.
Yes,
And that's kind of what I'm concerned about, that it does affect such a large number of people, and as I said, so many different ways that they could take advantage of it.
well, if I may address that, the key conflict that brought us to you now is our vice chair is a member of a planning commission that serves, among others, 4 of the sending towns of the Neshoba School District. She actually doesn't work for any of them on anything, and her work is, you know, she draws maps and things like that. But because the commission she works for does work for our sending towns, it puts her in conflict, and we may have another member who may also be in conflict. And so we would lose our vice chair, who's the chair of our policy subcommittee, doing a lot of good work for us and who has a lot of experience, and we might lose other members because of this. She still would have to announce the conflict, send the letter within the 30 days as is required by law. But drawing maps for a planning commission and being on the school committee, at least in my mind, doesn't feel much like a conflict.
Paul, have you seen a lot of circumstances in art in the town here where this would have been an issue or has come up, or?
Yeah, for example, if you had an attorney who was on the Board of Health, if you granted special municipal employee status, they could present a client before the planning board, because the planning board would not be a health matter. And I think the town in my understanding, didn't like that idea of appearance of conflict, where somebody's like an insider's game where, well, gee, that's a town official, and although they're not in their official capacity, they're representing somebody else before a board or has a contract with the town. So I think that's why the town has shied away from it in the 12 years that I knew that. Now, again, I'm not casting anything on the school district, because the school district is different. They're not the school committee oversees the entire Neshoba Regional School District, the technical school district. So everything falls under their jurisdiction, whereas in a town, it's more departmental.
Right.
So most things would fall under the school committee because they're the umbrella organization.
And how would it work if we voted, all the other towns voted, and then we decided we wanted to revoke it? Could we alone revoke?
Well, that would revoke it from everybody, apparently it has to be unanimous for the whole school committee.
But do all the other towns also have to vote to revoke?
Yes, that's what Maura said, yes.
We need all 8 towns to designate it
What-
as special.
What we're saying is, let's say that we vote to approve it, but we change our mind later on, and we want to not go forward with it at some point. What happens then? Nothing changes until all the other towns agree with us?
No, this,
Or
as
do we
Pat-
kill it in the future? Any one town can kill that in the future.
any one town can kill it. But as you know from our own Chelmsford School Committee, teachers are very often eager to be on school committees. And, Chelmsford School Committee has 2 active teachers, 1 retired educator. And in the case of a teacher who lives in Chelmsford who teaches in Westford, for example, they actually couldn't come forward to be on the Neshoba Tech School Committee. And I think
Why?
because they get their income from one of the sending towns,
Okay.
unless they are designated as,
A special municipal, I
Speci-
see,
right.
okay. So your concern is that if you have a Board of Health member for the sake of argument, who then has this designation for the express purpose of being on this regional school committee, they could then go in front of AIR and say, I'm representing Chelmsford as a Board of Health? Like,
No,
how would that conflict, how would this conflict?
I'm saying that's how it would work inside the town, why the town has shied away from it, is that you didn't want somebody who's on the Board of Appeals, appearing before the Conservation Commission as an attorney or a client or an agent or an engineer
But wouldn't
and
they
so
have to
forth.
say that anyway?
No, you're prohibited from doing it.
Okay.
So that's why you see many professional people. You don't see that crossover. You don't see professional people presenting before other boards who are town officials. So if you've gone to many planning board, Board of Appeals, Conservation Commission, so forth, you don't see town officials in another capacity representing clients, because we don't allow that special municipal exemption. Case with the school committee here is you've got district, that runs 9 towns, and the question then becomes, is there some conflict, across those communities, which is what Lawrence is describing. A member is a
Is an
teacher, an
employee
educator, or a
and
salesperson
wants to do
wants to do
extra
a contract. So
Yes. So-
that's the conflict of which is why they've come.
Right,
And
okay.
it's, as far as I know, in the history of the regional school district, this has never
Has it come up before?
has never come up before.
But right now, it sounds like we have at least 2 conflicts here.
Potentially, but again, since I've been here, and I think going back, I'm not aware that this has ever risen before in the Neshoba Tech history of
But it sounds
school
like
committee,
it's
which goes back to this-
arising now, and it needs to be looked at, and that's why it's being brought up now?
That's what I'm saying. I don't know what's different now than had been there 10 years ago, 20 years ago, because the ethics law has been in effect for
Right.
decades.
Dick DeFreitas, there's another side to this, too. I'm CFO of a payroll company in town. And not that we would do municipal projects, because we no bid all those. And the reason being that I'd have to hire people to do the municipal job, and if I lost the contract the next year, I'd have to let them go, and that's not what we're about. But if you're a significant employee of your employer, you put them in conflict. Because I'm CFO, a payroll company cannot do bookkeeping, cannot do any project for any of the member towns. But like I said, us personally, we no bid all that stuff. So there's a prohibition there too.
It's conflict of interest is what the.
Yeah, I get
That's
that.
what it is. So
But
would he be beholden if Richard were doing a payroll for the town of
Air or something.
Air?
And
would
getting
he,
money
Would he
would-
be in conflict voting on the school, as a school committee member, because might that reflect his
It would be
interest in Air?
kickback. Yes.
Which is
No,
one
no,
of
I
the
get
member
that. I
towns.
get that.
That's what this falls under. It falls under the conflict of interest statute.
But it sounds like we've got some folks who might be in conflict right now,
Right.
at,
Right.
but tangentially.
Mm-hmm.
So would it be helpful to vote for those people who
But
seem
you
to
can't.
be?
You have to designate the entire board. You can't
We're not-
do individuals.
We're not asking that you vote for the people.
You can't.
We're asking that you vote the position.
You vote the position, the
the position.
entirety, not the people.
If I
Would you-
may, for example, if I were an
Just identify,
You have to go to the microphone. They can't hear you at home.
Don Air, representative of Neshoba Tech for the town. If I were an electrician, for example, and I was on the board at Neshoba Tech, I could never bid a job in any of those 8 towns. I could never bid it. You can't do it because I would get money from them.
Right.
If I worked for a company that bid them, and I was the lead electrician, I'd have to give up one or the other. And this particular woman is doing maps for a 20-community regional central Mass thing, and she went to ethics to try to just report that she was doing it. This came from ethics that said you have to go to all 8 towns, you have to get every one of the towns by a majority of their board to approve you in this. Groton does it. They have 4 or 5 specific titles that they do this to. And we're asking that you give it to us so that, number one, as Lawrence said, we're a tech school. We want that electrician on the board. We want that person who's working out in industry to consider being on the board and bringing expertise to the board.
in this case, the electrician works for a town.
He cannot ever work for a town under the present thing if he's a member of the school committee.
I feel like this is a special case. We keep talking about how.
But you're not talking about individuals, you're talking
No,
about.
no, I understand.
Ethics
So-
is talking
Yes,
about,
about global, about
Well-
the committee, and I get that, and I actually think that this is one of those cases where, you know, we've talked in the past about not having municipal employees, about having trouble replacing municipal employees and presenting this as a viable career because people don't know, and I think that
and I believe as Lawrence said to you, you make the appointment, you and the school committee make the appointment to sit at that position.
so where we get control
If you
over
felt
who's on
there
it.
was a situation, you just don't have to appoint that person.
How long is her position?
3-year terms.
But on the project she's working on right now with the maps,
She's gonna be working on that for a long time. This is a central Mass project. You know?
So I think where this is a special case where we actually get to make the appointments, and where
Only make
where-
the appointments of your town. You're a designated special municipal employee for the entire district. That's the
Yes.
key. You don't have
We're
a
only
say
control-
on
we
who's
can only
chosen.
control
Four
a little
towns,
piece.
Right, you don't have a say on who's
done this.
appointed in Air or Townsend
No,
or whatever.
but-
But your designation applies to all towns.
right.
That's what they're getting at.
so we're giving carte blanche to the entire board from all the towns. I'm
Right.
sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Right.
Where we have a say in who is appointed to this board, and where this board is there to serve the tech school and to represent, it seems to me that this is a special case only because this deals with education, this deals with it does deal with promoting town interests, and I see the financial conflict of interest there, but I also see the benefits in exposing students to that expertise that can come with a school committee, that where you have these people who have that wide range of professional expertise working for the school committee. And it sounds like they sometimes have a hard time, if what I understood from our conversation last week is true, it sounds like they sometimes have a hard time
Another
finding
example,
people
I could.
to sit on that committee because of these conflicts. And it sounds like if we could free up this for this case, because it is such a special, unique case, it would help Neshoba Tech, which is in everyone's best interests.
When when I read this initially, I felt that it was pretty simple, that it was something that would help Neshoba get better quality people. And then as I got into it, you find that really all it is an ethics question. And when you go through the ethics training that you have to do when you're a servant of the town, there is no leeway. You can't say, well, I know most people wouldn't do this, but there's always someone who will, and that's what the ethic rule is for. It's to protect for those rogue people who would do it. And so I think it's kind of a conundrum that we would like to assist, and we understand that this person probably would never do that. But if you grant that classification to anybody, sooner or later, there's someone who would take advantage of it.
So if we actually make the assumption that most people working for schools are there because they believe in the mission of the school, short of these for-profit schools where there is a clear lack of beneficial motive. If this is revocable, if we have oversight of this, if we see somebody abusing their position there, we can revoke this. And so this seems like this would come with some pretty stiff penalties if anyone abused it. And if we have oversight over our designees, and if one town revokes it, then everyone loses it. It seems to me that the committee would be very aware of that and would be cautious in crossing that line.
George, you've been involved in ethics questions historically once in a while, I think.
My whole life.
What do you feel about this?
I don't know, I guess it's maybe a little bit more complicated than I thought this was basically a kind of a layup type of thing, but, I think most people, if they have a question, they ask, like, we've had a few instances on the board here where, regarding votes, and people, went to the Ethics Commission to make sure it was okay to vote or not to vote on a specific subject based on a relationship or a conflict in a job. So I would think that if people follow the ethics rules, it kind of doesn't really matter. But then again, we don't have any control over it. So I'm willing to go along with it, but I guess I can see where it's complicated. I mean, if you want to wait and get a legal opinion, that's.
We had a circumstance where there was a member of the Board of Assessors.
Right.
The assessors came in and made a similar appeal to the selectmen. And one of their members wanted special municipal employee status for the Board of Assessors. And the only thing I raised that is because I think that you will have this before you in the town in short order. Now, I'm not saying it's good or bad, but I just wanted to point out to that because this did come before the Board of Selectmen in the last couple of years. And the board turned it down, and then the person ended up resigning, and we had to fill the vacancy on the Board of Assessors.
Yeah.
But we're under no obligation to supply this for other groups,
No,
are we?
but I just want to point out that, let the board know that you can expect that you probably will get other requests from town boards. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, you can handle each one individually, but I just wanted you to be aware that this has surfaced periodically inside the town.
Excuse me, in most of these cases that have appeared in town, it's a town employee in a board, or a town employee in another board within the town.
I mean, Sam Chase is there, I mean, Sam can speak,
Right.
he was on the board when the Board of Assessors brought that.
We're
up.
talking,
It wasn't an employee, it was a board member.
affecting the
let me-
region.
Let me ask you a question. How many total towns have to sign off on it?
Everyone, eight towns.
8 towns. You
We've
have,
got 4, probably 5 tonight. And we were hoping for 6.
and I suggest that we delay it Once you have 7, come back and see us again and we'll decide.
Well, that's kind of a punt. I mean,
No.
we're kind of like saying what it was. Here's my take on it is, I understand that your plight is that you're trying to attract, vocational type specialists to your board so that you get that. And 8 school systems does cast quite a swath across this part of the state, where it's also, we can revoke it at any point. I find it difficult to say 8 towns, electrician, you can't work in 8 towns, especially if you live in one of those towns. Now you're making him
He
drive.
can't work.
Well, he can't work on behalf of the town, one of those other towns.
Can't have a contract.
I can't, he can't be on a Neshoba board as a Chelmsford member and do a job in air. He
Yeah,
can't
and
do it.
I
For the
often
town of
see,
it, for the town of
but
it.
the great
He
examples.
can't own a hardware store and sell light bulbs.
Right, but I see
Okay, any of the
small,
8 towns.
I see small plumbers get jobs from big municipalities, like replacing our water fountains. That was not a huge plumber that won that bid, and I would think that that's the type of guy you want to attract to one of these boards.
Because that's where he's pulling his apprentice from, is from the local tech school. I think that this is a
See, but
weird special case.
someone could make an argument that gives him a leg up now, because if he's getting his apprentice out of the tech where he's working,
Where
and
he's
he's running a plumbing company, and that industry right now is red hot trying to find laborers.
It is.
That could give him an unfair advantage. That's the reason why you wouldn't do this.
Okay, so if that
You might have just
person,
made
so
my
if
point.
that plumber in this example, so if that plumber in this example has to disclose his conflict there.
He's gonna walk off the board.
And you're 100% sure we can revoke it at any time, so if we sniff
My understanding is that you have
So
the
if somebody
opportunity
messes
to
it up,
revoke.
they mess it up for everyone.
So-
I would think that pressure would
If we
maintain.
took a zero tolerance policy on it, someone comes and complains in the slightest way, you revoke it.
I mean, I feel like
Wouldn't do it
this.
for a board
And
member
if
in
you're
town,
gonna-
but
if-
it's
if
such
you
I mean,
both
I'm also coming at
towns.
this from a teacher where you have rules, but there's always an exception. Of course, I had a no late policy, but then somebody's dog dies and their grandmother's sick, and you're like, okay, well, whatever, just give it to me next week. So I feel like with schools there is more leeway just because it is the nature of a school. Like you've got so many things, and it's not clockwork. You've got so many moving parts there, and with this where you have 8 systems trying to work together, you've got 8 towns trying to do this thing together.
So the disclosures would be made at the Neshoba Tech School Committee meetings.
Definitely.
Those meetings, which of course are not viewable
Well, they will
online
be.
in any of the communities.
They will be.
Anything there?
Working
Someone was
on that.
upset and came to our open session and said, hey, we got this problem.
Right.
They have to report to ethics that they're gonna do. They have, that's how this came about. She called
other towns
ethics
have-
and said, I'm on this commission and
Has-
I'm on the board.
Has,
Special municipal.
So
Bill Ricca
she
voted on this yet?
reported herself.
Bill
Nobody
Ricca.
checked
Have they
in.
voted on
Right.
it yet?
Who's that?
Bill Ricca.
Not in it.
They're not part of
Not
this.
part of the show.
Bill LaRicca is part of Shawshene Tech.
Yeah.
Westford?
In addition to, electricians, plumbers, people in industry, educators like Mr. Ayer make excellent school committee members, and they, right now, as I say, if they teach in any of the 8 school districts,
Yeah,
they
I couldn't
they
teach
can't
night
serve.
school.
Right.
If a check comes from you, I can't teach night school.
Right. So if Mr. Ayer,
If
who's
the town of
retired,
Shirley wanted to implement a vocational program, I'm a certified superintendent, and they wanted to pay a stipend for someone to work, I can't take that job. As it sits right now.
So I guess I would say that in almost every situation when this comes up, it is a special circumstance. And if there were a way to restrict it to a special circumstance, that's one thing, but we can't. It's all or nothing. So that's.
But
why-
it's relating to the school committee. It's not everybody. It's just relating to the school committee.
Everybody on the school committee.
I mean, technically, in theory, we're approving our members, the next town approves their members. It affects all of them, but because you need 8, it's kind of almost like everybody's approving just their members, and when they get all 8, it applies to everybody. That's one way to think about it, but
Well, not really.
it is.
I agree.
So we respectfully ask that you consider this.
So if after a year, and you get all 8 yeses, and one of the towns has a
This
second
girl
thought.
got to leave for a job tomorrow.
And a year from now, one of the towns, not necessarily Chelmsford, one of the towns decides they want to change it,
They're going to notify all of you.
and is it dead at that point?
They're going to notify all of you that they are going to revoke and recommend that you revoke too.
That they,
Because it's not a majority. It is not, if it was like, what is it, the budget, where you get a certain percent, you have it. This is all or nothing.
right, but after a year, if one of the towns decides that they don't want it,
It's dead.
No, he said they have to let the other towns know.
right, but it still continues.
May I?
Sure.
So in that case,
Let him take it.
I'm sorry, in that case, then it would revoke it for everybody.
It would vote it for everyone.
It would
Percent,
revoke it. It
yeah.
has to be, I don't understand the legalese of why. I just know that our council has said it has to be unanimous. And I do know that members of our board who put in a lot of hours, particularly on policy, will have to leave our board because they're not going to leave their job.
So even if we vote positively, and one town votes against it, our vote doesn't.
Right,
it's
because
dead.
it's one committee, and you, all of you have to designate for the one
And if we're
committee.
all in harmony for the next year, and one town decides for whatever reason they want to change their mind, then it's dead for all of them.
Right.
And those people then, who are on there, under that special, have to leave.
Yes,
That's what you're,
yes.
so it's really, never have an exception, never have a situation, and you're good to go. But if you have an exception, it's probably going to be bad for everyone. Would you say that's the way it is?
I would agree with you.
All right, do we have a motion?
Make a motion, what tab are we on, 8? Make a motion to approve special municipal employee status for the Neshoba Valley Technical High School District School Committee.
Do you have a second?
A second.
Any more discussion?
Paul, any cons you can think of?
What's that?
Any more, I know pros and cons, but particularly cons to this that you can think of?
No, I mean, I think they've all been laid out. They basically, the idea of the employment conflict or the sales conflict, they've all been pointed out.
Because you explained it pretty even keel, but then I thought I saw maybe you have some hesitation there. I just didn't know if you were any feeling on it one way or the other.
No. Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Those against? 4-1. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please let us know how you do with the rest of the towns.
Will indeed. And Neshoba Tech Open House is on Sunday, November 4th. Thank you all.
Is it going to be televised? Probably not, huh?
What we're doing, Mr. Chairman, what we're doing is we've established the use of board docs to make our meetings very transparent and our minutes and packages. I could give a presentation on that some other night. I don't want to take your time this evening.
That's right. How are you doing with televising your meetings?
So we are making progress. In addition to board docs, where you can see live updates of the meeting, we are working on televising some key meetings coming up, including the town breakfast and budget presentations. So we're starting slowly on that, but also this board docs package makes it so that the minutes, the agendas, the packages, and even live updates of the votes can be tracked on a computer or a phone as they happen. So greater transparency than we've ever had, and we're continuing to work at it.
Thank you.
What time is your open house on November 4th?
It's noon to 3. It's a Sunday from noon to 3. And also, our liaison from your committee, Pat Wojcik, attends our meetings regularly, so Pat keeps an eye on us.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, we'll revert back to the agenda as written. Thank you. Thank you.
That was gonna be quick. Didn't realize it was, sorry.
No, no problem. All right, so we had open session. There was no one who wanted to speak.
Vacancies, committee vacancies.
Committee vacancies.
So the Town Agricultural Commission has 2 available seats. The Board of Appeals is looking for 1 alternate position. CCA Advisory Committee, 2 seats available. Center Village Master Plan Implementation Committee, 1 available seat. Civic Committee, 4 seats available. We're looking for 1 volunteer for the Community Action Program Committee, 3 volunteer associate member positions available for the Council on Aging, up to 21 seats on the Cultural Council. The Dog Park has 1 open seat. Energy Conservation Committee looking for 4 individuals. Historic District, 1 alternate position. Holiday Decorating Committee, 3 positions available. Middlesex Canal Commission, 2 seats available. Parade Committee will accept all participants. All applicants. Personnel Board, looking for 2 individuals. Public Celebrations Committee, 5 open positions. Recycling Committee has 4. Sign Advisory Committee, looking for 3 volunteers, and the Skate Park Committee is looking for 2 volunteers. If you're interested in serving on a town board or committee, feel free to apply at the town website or contact the town manager's office. He can be reached at 978-250-5201. Thanks.
Thank you, Ken. Next, we have 1 public hearing. It's a continuation of the carry and alcohol license from Jersey Central American Food. Are they here tonight?
Yes. Good evening.
We kind of left it open to see if there were any comments. Anyone heard any comments one way or the other from the public?
I've heard positive comments in favor of allowing, bring your own liquor, beer, wine.
I just have one question. I have here the rules that pertain to this.
Yes, sir.
And there's only one that I find difficult, and that is, you can, let's say, bring in a bottle of wine, and if you open the bottle of wine, and it's open, and you never drank from it, you cannot leave with that bottle.
No, sir, that's correct. You cannot.
How do you feel you're gonna deal with that patron? It would seem that some people might get a little
You have to-
belligerent about it.
But if I buy a bottle of wine at
Restaurant.
Andiamo tonight
can.
and don't drink it and leave it in my
And you can have
cup,
it
I can't
recorked.
funnel it back into the bottle and cork it and bring it out to
Oh,
my
you can take
car
your,
either.
you can take the, you can take the corked bottle with you from a restaurant.
But
If
this,
you have a special like
Seal.
seal,
Yeah,
but they're not, because they're not allowed to handle
Exactly,
the
that's what I'm saying,
alcohol,
right.
that's why. It's
That's the
because the
difference.
restaurant is allowed to handle
They
the
can't bag it.
alcohol. So long as that is understood that you are leaving
You
it
can't
behind.
leave with it.
Right, but they don't have the ability to have those sealable bags because they're not.
No,
somebody-
I'm not
This is-
saying, I'm not questioning that. I'm just questioning that someone's gonna say, what are you talking about? I'm taking it with me.
well, then they
the
can call the
rule.
police, because the police are aware of this policy,
I mean,
and they're the ones
that's
that,
the
and they're
rule,
the ones that
and that
suggested
whole
it.
sealable bag thing
Could.
is fairly recent.
I would imagine after the first 2 times that's happening, they're gonna start explaining to people, if you open this, you can't leave with it.
Yeah,
Actually, we'd like to preemptively state that up front. We
Yeah.
want some signage to put up in the restaurant. We want to address almost the, kind of common facts, if you will, to
Probably before
avoid
it
that
happens.
conflict, yes. It's much easier to state it coming in, so people, it's new to us, so it's new to everyone else. So we want to make sure it's as plain and simple as possible. So our intention is to post, some informative facts, just so people know, in that particular case, you're going to forfeit the bottle. You cannot leave with an open container of alcohol.
And I don't think that's any
If we were to
different.
go forward with this, how soon can they start doing this? Doesn't go to the
As soon as you approve it,
ABC?
yeah.
or-
Do they then go to the AB? No?
No, no,
This is like
No, there's no
one
liquor,
day.
there's no liquor license. so-
Could be tomorrow.
tomorrow, yeah, or tonight.
tonight, they're still open, so,
All right,
Oh,
Tomorrow.
you had asked about comments. I did see on Facebook their food's really good.
all right. All right, do we have a motion?
I will make a motion to approve
You
the,
should close the
Close
Oh.
the public hearing.
Oh, we need to close, all right.
You
We have
should
a
ask
motion to
them.
close the public hearing?
You should ask if there's anybody that wants to speak.
Oh, does
to
anyone
it.
like to speak about this tonight? No one? All right. Then do we have a motion? to
I'll make a
close?
motion to close the public hearing.
I second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye, 5-0. All right.
I'll make a motion to approve the carry and alcohol license for
Aerosol.
Aerosol Central American Food LLC.
You have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0. I haven't been down, but I'll find a little bottle of wine, I'll be down there.
Oh, they
Thank you
they
all.
sell them in cans. They call them
Okay.
backpack.
Just so you know,
backpack
Pat
wine.
wrote this
Okay.
legislation.
So-
You wrote that bylaw, right? You and,
Well, with the help
Yeah.
of the police chief, yes.
yeah, and Matt Hanson. Yeah.
It seems to be pretty precise
I
and
can't believe nobody's used it.
Well, maybe
Well,
one,
we
maybe.
appreciate the
We'll be down.
confidence and we'll handle it appropriately. Thank
Good
you all.
luck.
thank you.
Have a nice evening. Thank you.
You too.
All right, we have some licenses. One-day beer and wine license for the Chelmsford Garden Club event at Chelmsford Senior Center. Anyone here tonight?
Yes, my name is Monica Kent, and I live in Chelmsford. And I'm here representing the Chelmsford Garden Club, and we are applying for a one-day beer and alcohol license for our biannual fashion show that will be held at the Senior Center on November 8th.
Is this an annual event?
Biannual.
Biannual?
Well, we have it every 2 years.
Every 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
You got a model? Look.
Yes, we could use some models.
Yeah,
right?
I'll
You have
nominate
male
Kenny.
and female models?
Yes.
Oh, sign them up. Any questions?
We have done it before, and we are not a rowdy group.
Debatable.
You usually get a pretty good turnout?
We do. Yes, there's 250 tickets sold, and they're
Already?
usually sold out if we fill the center.
Wow.
And it's a pretty good turnout. It's a really good evening. Lots of good food and a raffle and silent auction and a very enjoyable evening.
Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve a one-day beer and wine license for the Chelmsford Senior Center for November 8th.
I second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0. One last question. If
Yes.
someone wanted to buy a ticket, how would they go about doing it?
Yes, there will be signs. You can get it from any member of the club, but there will be signs. Mary Donnellan Interiors on Fletcher Street will have tickets, and they'll be sold the night of the event at the door.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do you need the copy that we got from the, when we applied? Do you need that, or is that just
No.
for us?
No, I
No.
think we're good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good luck.
Good luck.
And we have a one-day all-alcoholic beverage license for St. Martinet's Armenian Church. Is anyone here tonight from them? Nope, this is something that comes up very often. Never been abused. Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the one-day all-alcohol beverage license for St. Martinet's Armenian Church at 180 Old Westford Road for October 3rd, 2018.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Right.
5-0. Next, we have United Steelworkers' request for National Grid gas permit moratorium. If you would, be brief. I don't see how you can bring any more to the table.
I'll be very brief. Jim Mariolis, United Steelworkers. Again, I came before you last week. The board decided to defer to this week to talk about the issue of working in the moratorium and non-emergency gas work. And we have had a meeting last week. It was last Wednesday. A day later, the Department of Public Utilities, which regulates the gas companies, issued what they call an exit letter. Basically, it says, and I will just read it. The Pipeline Engineering and Safety Division of the Department of Public Utilities has received information regarding National Grid's distribution system. We received this information and evidence from concerned citizens and reviewed to determine whether the information indicates violations of 49 CFR Part 192. Based on our review, we've determined that National Grid may be in violation of various sections of 49 CFR Part 192. And then it goes on to give a brief description of the violations, which I've given you a copy of our numbered examples that we've had out there in instances. Out of the total 100 that we had, 29 of them are listed. Just in closing on the exit letter, based on the information provided by the division's review, it appears that National Grid may have failed to follow proper procedures on several occasions and may be in violation of following sections of the Federal Pipeline Safety Regulations, 49 CFR Part 192. Again, they're going to continue to investigate. The company has 30 days to respond, but based on the information and videos that we provided, they are looking into this, and they are going to review for potentially, it could lead to notice of probable violations, basically, of, as I said earlier, violations. So that's where we're at now. It's October now. We've asked for this work to be watched and monitored and limited, and that's we come before you again to see if there's any action to be taken.
I noticed, Gary, you're here tonight. Has there been any change since last week when you said there's been no incidents at all in town? Anyone have any questions of the speaker?
I feel bad that they're not working, but, I mean, I believe, it's my feeling, it's really not our decision. I mean, we could write a softball letter, I mean, because I'd like to see, I don't want to see anything happen like happened down in Lawrence, Andover, or whatever, but I just don't, I think it's something that has to be decided. I mean, if the public utilities decided there was enough violations, I think they should have made a stronger a decision.
Well, I think
That's
that's
all.
what Jim said, is they're looking into it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just, and it just, even one of the answers was like a typical answer, well, they may be in violation, well, they may not be in violation. I'm not saying they're not, I'm not saying, yeah.
Yep.
I just think it's hard. I mean, we get, we have to depend on National Grid as much as we have to depend on you people to do the work for National Grid, and it makes it very difficult. So, I'm just, I feel badly for, I have a lot of friends, that are, and I've spoken to a lot of National Grid employees who feel badly for their friends who are out on work, so. But I don't think I could, I'm not gonna vote to send a letter. That's,
Well, I think I echo your sentiments, George. I feel badly that anyone is out of work for the situation. We're starting to get in, we're really going to be in the holiday season, Thanksgiving, Christmas, and it's going to be a real detriment to the holiday season for many, many people. But at the same time, we're a city, unless there is a demonstrated problem in the town, I don't see how we can jump in between a labor management argument. That's just my feeling. How do you feel, Pat?
I agree with that. And we do have the inspectors in town that, are watching anything that would be done, that would be subject to any kind of issue like this, so I feel we are well protected. I agree with you, though, too. I mean, it is a labor issue, and it would be good if they could resolve it.
no question.
I would reiterate that. I don't want to get pulled in the middle of a labor dispute with an employer. I do feel for you guys. I can only imagine what it's like to be locked out and not getting a paycheck. It's got to be really difficult, so. But I probably wouldn't want to get involved writing a letter.
All right. Do we have a motion? Then there's a motion. Emily, do you have anything to say? I thought you had already said it.
I mean, I said it last week. I am surprised. I would love to know the thought process behind all of the other towns that have put forth the moratorium, whether or not they held to it firmly, because I know there has been work permitted in those towns when it was necessary. So I wonder how much of that is for appearance's sake and how much of it is serious. I mean, I think it's appalling. I think National Grid has plenty of money. I think their profits are absurd. And I don't understand how you can deny people health care. I just think that's reprehensible. So, I mean, it's my personal feeling on it. But I don't really know what I can do, so.
May I, after hearing you, just give your thoughts, as I know where I think this is going? Make no mistake, we're just talking about public safety here.
Yeah.
These examples of these regulators, and Council, Selectman, you mentioned Lawrence, you do have these regulator pits, you have these regulators in town here. And also you said you're inspectors, you mean the highway people? When you said the town inspectors and you feel safe?
Gas inspectors. We have gas inspectors in town.
Okay, because again, the DPU itself only has 2. And if we're leaving it just to them, there's issues. And I have a feeling there's going to be some changes, hopefully better changes, after what happened in Lawrence. So again, if you feel it's just strictly a labor dispute, it is not. But again, I've came to you with examples, and I've spoke for the last almost 3 months. And if there's anything else, I appreciate your consideration here.
So, I guess we
Not to do
have a
anything, right?
motion not to create a motion then.
We don't have to do
You
anything.
don't have to do anything.
Okay. If things should change in the future, you're welcome to come back and speak to us.
Absolutely, and something could happen tomorrow that might make you change your mind, so
Jim,
that's fine. Thank you so much.
You had said in 30 days they're going to do a review. I mean, if they come back and say, hands down, there's 100 violations here, come on back. But
We will continue to do that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Board of Health update.
All right, we're going back to reports and presentations.
Yes.
The Board of Health update on the chicken and rats on 20 and 25 Buckman Drive.
Yeah,
You're still in meeting?
yeah, they're still meeting downstairs, and
Anyone here?
Sean's
who'd like
not able to. Sean Shanahan's not able to be here. He had a family conflict this evening. What has transpired in the last week is the last Wednesday evening, the Planning Board and the Board of Health met jointly. The outcome of that meeting, as has been reported, was to withdraw. The Planning Board will withdraw the article, take no action at the fall annual town meeting in 2 weeks. In addition to that, the Building Commissioner, Sean Shanahan, has issued letters of zoning enforcement letters to the 11 license holders who have been granted chicken licenses from the Board of Health that don't meet the 40,000 square foot requirement in the bylaw. This afternoon, Mike and I and Sue Rosa, who's now back in a part-time capacity from her medical leave, met to discuss the situation. We anticipate it's being discussed this evening at the Board of Health meeting. As it stands now, those 11 people did what they were supposed to do. They went and applied for a license for chickens from the Board of Health. They were granted a license. That license expires on December 31st. What we anticipate happening is that the Board of Health will send out correspondence this month saying your license expires in the end of the calendar year. They would not renew they will not renew or issue new licenses that would not conform to the zoning bylaw. So in essence, people would be given 3 months' notice that your license is expiring, and because they don't meet the zoning requirement, unless they get some variance or from the Board of Appeals, that they will not be able to house chickens on December 31st, after December 31st, 2018. So that's where we think that
We're
this is
treating
heading.
it softly. We're not just hitting them with the fine immediately.
Right, because what we think, quite frankly, is, think about it. These people acted in good faith, went to the Board of Health, sought a license, made an investment in chickens, chicken structures, and so forth.
we're given a license.
And
They
we're
were
given a
given a
license. And we're given a
license.
license. And so I think but the license expires. And so I think if we do something short of that, i.e. more immediate, then the town may bear some liability, financial responsibility if those licenses or action were taken to terminate the existing Board of Health license.
At what point can they go to the zoning board of appeal?
At any point. I mean, they could file today for that. The question would then become how likely, will the Board of Appeals grant,
The hardship.
that has to meet the standard of hardship. And in fact, anybody who's granted a letter from the building commissioner regarding the 40,000 can appeal to the Board of Appeals as well. And again, that process would take you 3 months as well, because you get the notice, you have the ability to appeal the building commissioner's zoning violation letter. You then have to get scheduled for a hearing, which often takes up to a month, and then if that hearing gets continued, so we're basically at the end of the calendar year before anything really substantively will become effective. But yes, they can apply immediately if they wish to seek a variance. The difficulty with that, obviously, is there's a cost associated with doing that, site plan, appearance of time, and so forth. So what I would suggest one do is one might want to go before the Board of Appeals informally, much like you see them go before the Planning Board informally, and sort of explain the situation that they're in and see if they can get some type of sense of the Board of Appeals as to their mindset. The problem is the Board of Appeals is constrained by the hardship provision under state law, because in essence you can't have the Board of Appeals acting as in a manner that changes the town's zoning bylaws. And so that's, so I guess what it's saying, it'd be a very narrow chance of likelihood in the opinion of town council that
What
that could
constitutes
happen.
hardship?
Usually it's topography and physical characteristic of a land. That's generally the issues of hardship that come before the Board of Appeals. It's,
Soil condition.
Yeah, soil conditions, those type of things. It's very rare that you'd have a dimensional requirement where you could say, well, I need 40,000 square feet, I've got 20. Grant me the hardship. Usually it's a case where, I need 200 feet of frontage, I got 197 feet. Can I get a variance? That's usually the question of hardship, topography, and so forth. So I'm not trying to paint, and neither was town council when we corresponded with them, don't want to paint an overly optimistic picture that they can just go and, they'll get a dozen licenses, because each case has to be judged on its own merits. And as I said, they has to meet this definition of hardship. And then, as we expect, there are many out there in the community who may not have licenses, who would then similarly follow a similar process. So ultimately, if this bylaw is going to change, it's got to go back to town meeting. But obviously, that's not going to happen in 2 weeks based on the recent decision by the planning board, which basically means that if they brought it back in the spring, that probably wouldn't be effective until next July, because not only does town meeting have to pass the zoning bylaw, it has to go to the Attorney General for review. That takes up to 90 days, and then it becomes posted and becomes effective. So that appears to be where this is going at this point in time.
All right. The next topic is Tax Classification Study Committee Report. And I believe we have a number of people here from that group.
Good evening. My name is Mike Rigney. I am the chair of the Tax Classification Study Committee. There are a number of members of the committee in the audience. John Edwards, Phil Pichette, Helen Blazioli, Dan Burke, and our ex officio members, Frank Reen and Sam Chase. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear me tonight. I know you've got a busy schedule. You have the final report, I believe, in the packet. I will not go through all 60-odd pages of it, point by point.
Thank the committee, Mike. Thank the whole committee, everybody that put in week after week.
Absolutely. We'll get there. We were created as an ad hoc committee to the Board of Selectmen, tasked with investigating and educating the board on the legislative intent and history of tax classification, and to try to understand some of the positive and negative effects of implementing a dual rate in Chelmsford. We were also asked to look at survey other towns and cities, see what we could learn from them, in particular what kind of an initial split rate was adopted when those towns did adopt a split rate, and to look at various exemptions that are available in town and to make recommendations about possible changes. The mission statement that the committee finally adopted was: the Tax Classification Study Committee will attempt to assess such effects objectively, and insofar as possible will recommend various courses of action for the Board of Selectmen to consider when deciding whether to adopt a uniform or split property tax rate or any other measures for tax relief. So let me just give you the executive summary, which is, it's complicated, okay? You can kind of broadly divide the possibilities for residential tax relief into a couple of categories. One is the 4 local options that you vote on every year as part of the classification vote. That would be the split rate, the small commercial exemption, the residential exemption, and the open space credit or exemption. Of the 4, the split rate is by far the most popular. 109 towns in Massachusetts adopted it in FY18. And it is essentially just a straight shift of the tax burden from residential properties to commercial, industrial, and personal property parcels. The board can choose to apply such a shift for the express purpose of reducing residential taxes, or to try to manage the levy split between the CIP properties and the residential properties, or without giving any reason at all for it. The state law and constitution are quite clear that that is well within your power. The constrictions of the law are such that you can only shift some of the burden from the residential side to the CIP side. You can't put it all over there. And so effectively you can think of the law as establishing 2 bounds for potential tax rates. One bound or one band for residential rates, another band for CIP rates. It is possible for those bands to overlap if you choose a uniform rate. Otherwise, you will have a slightly lower rate for the residential side and a slightly higher rate for the CIP side. It's important to remember that because of the imbalance in the CIP share, residential accounts for about 80% of the total property valuation in town, and the CIP parcels are about 20%. Because of that imbalance, for every $2 or $2.25 that's saved on the residential tax, an equivalently valued CIP property will pay an extra $10. That's just an inevitable side effect of the difference in the shares in town. If the residential share of the overall valuation were exactly 50% and the CIP share were 50%, you'd have a 1-to-1 correspondence. But there's no question that the money saved on the residential side is transferred to the commercial side, and you need to look at how big a shift the commercial side can really absorb. The increase in the tax burden could be offset a little bit for smaller commercial property owners by the small commercial exemption. There's a personal exemption as well. Right now it's at $5,000. You could also investigate expanding that to $10,000. That would cost the town a little bit of money, but not a great deal, about $20,000 all in all. Really. The residential exemption could be then used to further expand relief for low-income residential homeowners. It would apply only to residences that are or residential properties that are primary residence of the owner. So rental properties will actually see their rates go up. The residential exemption doesn't move anything over to the commercial side. It just transfers the burden within the residential class. Quite frankly, that's where the real money is. If you're going to try to make say a $500 reduction in somebody's property taxes, you're only going to get it probably with the residential exemption, and you're only going to get it at the lower valued end, somewhere around $300,000. Maybe you could achieve that. The cost is, of course, that the people in the $600,000 homes, the $700,000 homes, will pay more. So all of these, I'm sorry, I should say the open space exemption we also looked at. Chelmsford doesn't actually have any open space property, so for now you can overlook that, I think. All of these exemptions and these local options are revenue neutral for the town. Basically, they're moving the tax burden around from one class of property to another, so it has no real impact on the town budget. The other major category would be the exemptions. The exemptions are relief from property taxes that are available to eligible residents of the town. Eligibility typically tends to be things like veteran status, senior citizens, limited income and/or assets. There are quite a lot of them, and again, I'll refer you back to the report for the details on that. The thing about exemptions, there are a couple of opportunities that are laid out in the report to increase the exemptions available to the citizens in the town. But the exemptions are all going to come out of the town, or will need to come out of the town's operating budget. Any increase in exemption that you grant needs to be offset by reducing expenses somewhere else. So just a couple of things to think about. You will have a public classification hearing soon, I believe. The point of the hearing should be for the board to listen to all the stakeholders in town, and then use your judgment to find the appropriate balance for the tax burden. The timing of the hearing should be considered. One of the reasons we're here now instead of a month from now is because the residential exemption in particular increases the workload in the assessor's office. Trying to determine eligibility will require a little bit more time than they normally have. We would suggest that if you're going to consider a residential exemption, you consider it at the first meeting coming out of town meeting. The other thing that you need to consider is that circumstances change from year to year. What may be an appropriate tax rate one year may not be appropriate the next. What may be an affordable amount of exemptions granted to the local property owners may not be affordable. And so you always need to be paying attention to looking at trends, to trying to understand what's going on in the town. Kind of a corollary there is that any changes you make to the tax policy, whether it's a change in the split rate, a change in the exemptions, can lead to relatively large swings in people's tax bills. And so large changes should be avoided. Changes should be gradual, typically over the course of years. We were asked to look at the initial tax rate of other towns adopting a split rate. We surveyed the towns in Massachusetts from 2003 through 2016. We found about 20 towns that implemented a split rate in that time. By 2016, the average split in the towns that adopted and kept a split rate was 1.2, or a 20% shift to the commercial side. The initial rate adopted by those towns was only about 1.1. So that should give you some sense of the kind of appropriate movements. And that presents a challenge for the board organizationally, because if you're going to make changes over multiple years, you have to find a way, again, as an organization, to sustain a trajectory, even in the face of turnover. So finally, whatever choices you do make on the tax policy, the classification, or on the exemptions, remember that the tax policy itself is only one of three major tools that you have. The others are the economic development of the town and the budget itself. The interplay of these three factors is complex, and it is your right and responsibility to choose among the various options that are available to you for the betterment of the entire town. I'd like to finish up with some acknowledgments, and then I'll take questions. The first thing is we had a number of people come through and spend their summer talking to us. Paul Cohen was there. Lisa Marone, the director of the business development in town, came to talk with us. Amina Langford, who's on the finance committee and also runs a tax accountancy in Woburn, came and spent some time with us trying to help us understand some of the tax implications. Rhodes Johnson, an ex-selectman, came to give us some background on the last time that Chelmsford had a split rate and kind of give us his view on how that worked. Tim McGurty from the Worcester Research Bureau came and dropped a lot of good charts on us. I stole a couple for the report myself. Bill Mitchell, who is the chief assessor from the city of Leominster, also came out and talked about their approach, their kind of philosophy of a single rate, and how that worked for them. And then finally, just last week, we had John Power from Farley White, who's one of the owners of 150 and 300, I think, Apollo Drive, came and gave us some of his insights on really his big message was about momentum, what it is, how to recognize it. How to develop it is a little trickier, it turns out. I also really want to thank the entire committee. Mary Franz, Pat Wojcik, Evan Belansky, Helen, Tom Boucher from Lowell 5, Dan, John Edward, and Sheila, who are here tonight. People gave up their summer for this. It was a lot of work in a short time. I'm very proud of the report that we put together. I learned from every one of them, and I had a great time. Thank you very much, and I'll take questions.
Well, thank you. Your report was 67 pages, numerous nights. And Westford's report was 5 pages, and as far as I could tell, they met 4 times. So obviously, the quality of your product is night and day to theirs. I think you grasped what the tone was of what we're asking and tried to go with it. And, I think everyone had an open mind. Everyone started out at one place, and at times I thought they were someplace else, and then they were someplace else again. Let me just ask you some general questions. I have some specific ones. I did read the entire report, and if anyone in the town would like to get it, I believe it will be on the website. It's not a difficult read. There's a couple of parts that get a little confusing, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward and gives a great history of the whole thing. What was your greatest surprise in investigating this? Something that maybe you
I think
didn't anticipate?
I think the thing that really everybody took away from it was it is complicated. And I don't think anybody on the committee finished up with the same feeling about classification or exemptions or tax policy in general in Chelmsford that they had going in. I won't say that everybody shifted one way or another. I think that depended a lot on the individual and their background and where they came from. But I think everybody showed growth. And it's one of those topics, superficially, it seems very straightforward. But as you dig down into the details, it really does get complex. And again, the interplay with the other decisions that this board's responsible for, I think, is the thing that makes it most difficult. We didn't give you any recommendations because the question of a split rate interacts with the question of economic development and the question of extending or expanding exemptions interacts with the budget. And that was frankly beyond the scope of what we were charged with doing. And it's done properly by the 5 of you. Somebody needs to have a coherent vision of the whole thing. We looked at one portion of it, a messy, broad portion of it, but by far, far away from being the entire question. So I think that's the challenge that you guys have in front of you.
Right. I don't want to monopolize things, but I did read it. Just some specific questions. On page 19 at the bottom, it addresses a question that came up in multiple of your meetings, and that was something like this. If you split the tax rate, and let's say a tax rate, let's say an average home in Chelmsford, $400,000 home gets, let's say, a $200 tax break. The argument went that, well, that would be $200 in their pocket the first year. But as the next 10 years go by, there is none at all, and the taxes will go up every year and so forth. And, I looked at that as, no, they may not realize it unless someone points it out to them. that, in fact, they are getting $200 every year, or maybe a little bit more because of percentages, but about $200 a year for the next 10 years. And if they stuck it in the bank, and at the end of 10 years, they had $2,000, and they invested it wisely, Ken, right? How much might they have?
After 10 years,
Yeah,
$2,700.
$2,700. But most people wouldn't realize that, because the next year they would get a bill, and it will be bigger than the previous year's bill. But, I didn't see that as, just because they didn't understand it or know that they're getting it, I didn't find it as an argument. It seemed like at times it was an argument against doing it. And I was wondering what your committee in general thought about that.
I think there was a split. I think some members of the committee thought that with only seeing that initial drop and then a continued increase in later years, that people would not perceive a split rate as really having given them much of a tax break. Others took a viewpoint more like yours, which is that it's $200 in your pocket, not just the first year, but every single year, because even if you go up the next year, it's going up from a lower base. I think we were fairly agnostic about whether or not it was the responsibility of the taxpayer to learn that for themselves or not. I would say from a political point of view, most of us thought that there wouldn't be much benefit to anybody looking for a political gain from something like that. I think that's, if you want to take that approach, if you're going to try to put $200 in somebody's pocket every year, you're going to have to do it because you think it's the right thing to do, not because it's going to be credited to you. Because, as you say, most people aren't going to notice it.
All right. On page 20, you have the chart, which shows what happened since 2003 to 2016 in terms of towns that did enact a split tax rate.
Okay.
And there were quite a few towns in that list. But primarily, it didn't seem to be towns like Chelmsford. And what rates they enacted were very small.
Yes.
But we're familiar more with the towns that are contiguous to Chelmsford, and those are the A's and the B's and the C's,
Right.
which rates are much higher than generally on this list. Is that because that those towns just jumped in immediately, and as soon as the floodgates were open, they jumped in, and that since then towns have joined, but they've been just smaller towns?
I think that it's certainly true in the case of Billerica, that we did try to look at pretty hard. In response to your first comment, yes, Chelmsford is unique, just like every other city and town in Massachusetts is special in its own way. There are always differences. We tried to look and see if we could see patterns in the distribution of large versus small businesses. We didn't. We tried to see if there were patterns in the economic growth, the CIP growth of the entire universe of towns in Massachusetts that has similar CIP share to Chelmsford. We really didn't. I think the best thing you can say about the empirical evidence is that it doesn't say much one way or the other. It doesn't. There's no screaming red flags. There's nothing that says Chelmsford must absolutely not enact a split rate. There's also nothing that guarantees that if Chelmsford does impose a split rate, that everything's gonna grow to the sky again. You're gonna have to do it because you think it's the right thing to do, because you think it dovetails with your sense of the balancing the tax obligations between businesses and residents, that it works along with your economic development theories, that it fits the budget that you think is right for the town. About half of the towns that look like us from a CIP share point of view have a split rate. It's pretty much 50-50. Once you get to the bigger once you get to the bigger towns, they do mostly have split rates. A lot of the towns that have the high rates have had them since we began. That list is an exhaustive list of all the towns that,
Since
that
2013.
instituted it since 2003. So yeah, what you're looking at when the overall average for split rates is something like 1.51, right, which is higher than what Chelmsford would be allowed to impose anyway. That's because there's a bunch of towns that, as you say, jumped on that train right at the beginning and were allowed to increase the split to 1.75 back around 2003, 2004. The only town in that list that is in any one of the 3 concentric circles around Chelmsford is Lincoln. And clearly they
Don't
do
fit.
not look particularly like Chelmsford does.
All right. On page 13, it comes on early in the report. I thought it might have been more to the end. I assume you would get to it somewhere. And that was, it talks about the 2004 Chelmsford report on classification, when it pinpoints really 4 legitimate reasons, well,
Yes.
supposedly legitimate reasons, of why you can have a split tax rate. And one of them is to address a disproportionate use of municipal services by the commercial and industrial property classes. No one could see that anywhere in the past, and you concluded that it's not there now.
Well, so in fact, one of the things that Rhodes Johnson talked about was that at the time when the split rate was instituted in Chelmsford back in '89, I think, part of the discussion around that was that they were sewering the town, and the feeling was that businesses were deriving a benefit from that sewering in excess of what the residents were deriving. I think he had his own thoughts about whether that was really an accurate picture or not. The committee went around a couple of times on whether or not businesses use a lesser share of benefits from the town than residents do in town, and I think there not very many people's minds changed. I mean, on the one hand, you can say that, well, businesses don't use the schools, so right there they're not getting the benefit from that group, from that portion of the taxes. Or you can take the point of view that says that, every dollar I spend at Fishbones, I spend there because of the schools in Chelmsford. I moved here, I brought my family here because of the schools. And so the businesses derive that kind of benefit. There are some other arguments as well. I have a couple of fishing poles in my garage. If somebody were to break in my garage and steal my fishing poles, I'd be out $5 because they're old and not very good. Walmart derives much more benefit from having a well-regulated town because they have a lot more fishing poles. And if somebody broke in there and took all their fishing poles, they'd lose a lot more. So do I and Walmart somehow derive exactly the same benefit from the police force in Chelmsford? It's a complicated question. It depends on how you look at it. I think the one thing we could all agree on, though, was that the businesses were not using a disproportionate share of the services in town.
Another one was to correct an inequality in property values brought about by a flawed or inconsistently applied valuation method. I think you took exception to that. You could have made that argument many years ago, but that is not the way the world is today.
There were other people who took exception to that argument as well. In fact, that was very much the point of the 2004 report. They felt that they had identified a kind of a pricing flaw in the market. And I think, to be fair, if you go back another 20 years before that, one of the early court cases that's listed in kind of the timeline there was the SJC telling towns that, yes, you did actually have to value residential properties at their full and fair cash value, that the towns took liberties with the valuations. They would they would fully value a business property but not a residential property, or vice versa, as a way to kind of get around the idea that tax rates had to be completely proportional. I think what we found as we looked into that, we read the 2005 report, which was really a pretty convincing rebuttal of suggestion that the 2004 report made, that there was some kind of flaw in the property valuations. But I think since then, it's gotten even more strict. The BLA does now 5-year surveys of the assessments. Frank Green walked us through the way they go about making the value judgments for different properties. They use multiple methods. They're cross-checked. They have to be within a certain range of each other. Again, the BLA is basically an independent third party that comes in and does a thorough audit of books every 5 years. It was just done here in 2016. I think there's no doubt in anybody who was on the committee's mind that the property values in Chelmsford are accurate. So.
All right, there were 4 listed, that takes care of 2 of them. A third was to reduce the burden on residential taxpayers by an arbitrary shift of a portion of the tax burden to the commercial and industrial property class without any specific reason for doing so. And this is referred to as the political classification. Sun came up tomorrow, and it looked very bright, so I decided to do it.
From a legal perspective, you could. I think that, to tell you the truth, I find that a little bit of kind of a bleak view. I do kind of prefer the idea that the state law establishes bands of appropriate tax rates. And we're, coming from the distant past, 1950, 1960, where the Constitution said that all classes of property had to be taxed at the same rate. It's one of the reasons we can't have a graduated income tax. It's one thing to have a Constitution that says that. It's another on a practical level. The value of my home is not exactly the same thing as a value of a business. They might be valued by the assessor at the same amount, but the business throws off cash. It's associated with an income stream, and in fact, that income stream is part of the way that the property gets valued. The way the tax laws are set up, local taxes are accounted for as a kind of a normal cost of doing business for a business. So you can write you can write them off. That doesn't mean you get a free ride on them, but it diminishes it a little bit. And again, it's that in that sense, it's treated differently than a residence is treated. So you can, if you really kind of dig down into the details, there are legal differences between the $500,000 locked up in my house and the $500,000 locked up in the business next door. Even though they're both called property values, they are, in a sense, different. And so what state law has, and the Constitution was changed to allow it to happen, was that those two different things could, in fact, be treated slightly differently. That's what the bounds on the split rate are about. You can't treat them completely differently. There has to be some kind of correlation, because they're still property, presumably. But you are allowed to say that we're going to treat residential property values differently than we treat commercial and industrial property values. It's a policy decision for the board.
And the last one was to ensure that the proportional shares of contribution to the tax levy remain relatively constant over time. This is where you have either the residential sector or the commercial sector values going crazy. In other words, uphill, like residential retail, residential houses right now, every house that goes on the market sells for more than they were asking for it. You could have the same on the commercial side. If the town was successful in its economic development and became the hot space, it became the new Kenmore Square, then it would swing the other way. And that seemed to be a legitimate, something that could be documented, reason why.
Yes, I think there's another aspect to that, which is that I won't say that there's evidence to support it, but there's at least a suggestion that residential property does seem to appreciate differently than commercial property does. If you look at the chart in there showing the total residential valuation and the total CIP valuation, you see a couple of big peaks and troughs on the residential side. It's moving around, and when it starts to accelerate, it moves quite rapidly. On the same chart, the commercial, industrial, and personal property line is more or less flat. So the variations that happen seem to happen over on the residential side. And you can, as you say, you get into a situation sometimes then where the residential share of the overall town valuation, it can be increasing quite dramatically. There are times when it decreases too, but of course nobody complains then. But if you look back the last 20 or 30 years even, the CIP share of the town valuation has been really quite constant, ranging between, say, 21 and 18%. So yeah, you could the board could decide that you're just going to that those variations from year to year are just kind of noise in the signal, and you're going to damp them out, and you're just going to keep you're going to say the commercial property in town is responsible for paying 20% of the levy share every year, regardless of the valuation. So in a year where the residential property is worth 82, 83%, you'd have a split rate, and you would shift some of the burden over to the CIP side. In years when the residential property was at 20 when the residential property was at 80% or less, then you would have a single uniform rate and not shift anything over to the commercial side. The trick there, of course, is that you're trying to call a market value. And again, I guess that's a philosophical discussion for you to have amongst yourself, whether or not you really know the true value of the market or if you should just live with the swings.
One of the parts of the report, from me anyway, that was most complicated was the small business exemption. Not from the standpoint of who is entitled to it, but from the standpoint of how it really affects the average small business in general. That if you had a small business that owned its own place, you could kind of see that. But if a small business was in with other small businesses in a property that was owned by a third party, the fact that they may never see anything unless
Right.
the owner of the property wanted to share some of it back.
Exactly.
And there was another a part of that, and it didn't get into that. I didn't feel it get into a lot of depth about it, and that was the exemption of the 5,000 exemption that could be doubled to 10,000. That would cost the town some monies. I think you mentioned 22,000.
It's not a great deal of money. If you look at the distribution of values within the personal property class, most of the tax comes from the $5, $10, $20 million properties. While there are a lot of, I think there's about 140 to 150 personal property accounts with worth $10,000 or less, they'd be chopped off. But so there's a lot of them, but their valuation is low enough that the town wouldn't forego a lot of revenue if you chose to do that.
And if you jumped it to 10, they would be too low to, it wouldn't mean anything to them because they didn't have 5. Would that be true? If they didn't have, how much?
Right now the town exempts personal property accounts less than $5,000, and that was, I think, done as a bookkeeping maneuver. And recently, 2015, in part because tracking that many small accounts takes a lot of legwork. It's easier to keep track of one or two $20 million accounts than 140 or 150 $5,000 accounts. So a fair number of towns have taken that approach, I think. I would say you should talk to your assessor about whether or not it makes sense to increase that number to $10,000, either from just a paperwork point of view, would it free things up, or would the evidence for it actually helping small businesses is a little tenuous. There's no good way to connect the dots, as you say, between the property and the business. So, again, in the case of somebody who owns their own place in town and runs a business out of it, and they were eligible for a small commercial exemption, clearly that benefit goes through to the business. In a different situation, if somebody owns a property valued at less than $1 million and has a tenant in there who's, running a hair salon that has 5 people that work for it, the benefit for the small commercial exemption would go to the landlord. The landlord, as you say, could pass it through to the tenant, or the landlord might choose just to pocket the difference. And in fact, I believe in that case, the landlord would actually have a slightly larger deduction himself with the business taxes being a cost of, or the property taxes being a cost of normal business. He might actually walk away making more money out of that deal than without. So where does the benefit go? Perhaps over time you assume that the rent, the market rates for rent will kind of even themselves out. But this is why it's complicated. Everything you have a series of hammers, right? And trying to give benefits to people is a bunch of screws, right? The same thing happens with the exemptions. You can direct exemptions to some people, but not to others. The residential exemption has that flaw as well, or has a similar flaw in that it's not related to the income of the homeowner. So you can give relief to people who live in a $200,000 condo, but you don't know if they're in a $200,000 condo because they can't afford anything else, or because they've got a bunch of money socked away and they're just, that's what they just want to live in a smaller place. And presumably, one person needs the relief and the other doesn't need it so much.
Your report went into a lot of depth in terms of all the various deductions available for various classes. And that's something we asked for, and the report certainly addressed it. And it seems that although on the surface they seem fair, in some other ways, some of them don't seem fair. In other words, there's a veterans exemption, pretty straightforward, and by far the largest exemption taken by any group in town. You have others that are the senior exemption, and in some of them there are income qualifications. And in others, there's the total asset or the equity that a person has. And it seems that if you're in one of these houses, you're already over the equity limit because the house in many cases is worth more than that. In some cases, the house is exempt from the equity. So it's kind of varies all over the place, but each one seems to have a fairly a large contingent. The one that the town offers for community service, $750, I think. Is that per family or per individual?
Property owner.
So if it's a husband and wife, is that 2 or 1?
No, it's 1.
That's 1. And we have a large, I think it was 175, I think. Was that the number that people are involved in that? There's a large number of people.
Yeah, maybe that's an upper limit. It's about $950 a year, as I recall.
And it was a large contingent of people who take advantage of that. There was 1 for the blind, but again, that's limited
3
by
people.
how many blind people we have. But there was a lot of detail there. So again, I think people kept asking, a lot of people asked early on that this is a complicated issue, and it is complicated. On the surface, it's very simple, but it is complicated. And I think you and your committee provided a ready-made plan that if you want to know how complicated it is, please read this. And when you walk away from it, you'll probably still be confused. not from the standpoint of understanding how it comes together, but how everything is interrelated. And, I believe that any town in the future that wants to study classification would be best to start with this and plug their own town in instead of Chelmsford, but follow the same guidelines, and they would be led to a proper solution. Only one last question.
Sure.
Did you read all those books that were in the end? You had a lot
Well,
of,
they weren't books.
or pamphlet,
They were
or
papers.
articles.
I
Or,
think between John and I, we covered most of them. Just a couple of last plugs. One, I did also send you an Excel spreadsheet that John put together. You can plug in different rate splits, different levels of small commercial exemptions and different residential exemptions, and kind of look at the interplay of the three. I'd encourage you to play with that a little bit. And just to, if for no other reason than to get a sense of the scale of the different exemptions. The last thing is, and I should have said it during my acknowledgments phase, but I didn't. We could not have done this without Frank Green, and Sam Chase as well. But Frank especially was just a wealth of information. He probably doesn't get a lot of recognition in front of his bosses, but I'll tell you, he's a great thing for Chelmsford and its citizens. Don't let him go. Thanks.
any other questions? One of the things you brought up was, someone brought it up in your group, are you now done? Do you consider yourselves done, or you consider hanging in there for a while?
I'm done.
Mike Rigney is never submitting his name for anything again.
Because we're not voting till sometime down the road, not too far.
I understand.
And there may be, questions that we want to bring up and get some feelings back from.
I suspect you will hear from more than one of the committee members as you enter into the public hearing phase of the classification debate.
All right, and although you didn't make any recommendations, you did kind of point to one, and that is that you would hope that we would begin the open forum for discussion much sooner, as soon as possible, and allow people to speak either way, for or against, until we take a vote. So I would hope that we would put that after town meeting.
Well, it's easier said than done. The problem is after the town meeting, we have to submit all of our information to the state, including the town meeting actions, and then the assessors have to have the data. And I'll let Frank speak to that more, because he's the one that's going to be impacted on that. So it's a great concept. It's just an application.
Thank you very
quite
much.
challenging.
As you know, we hold the classification meetings each November. What has to be in place is the certification of, in this case, my fiscal 19 valuations. By the time I appear before you, they would have to have been certified by the Department of Revenue. In order for all the data that I give you to be relevant, that would have to be in place. So what we're doing is, it's Mike alluded to, everything was kind of ramped up. So I'm getting everything in earlier than normal, hoping to get approval sooner than usual, and kind of moving it up that way. But it all has to follow certain sequential order.
But realistically, it can't also finish until after the town meetings.
That's right,
Actions are
because that's when,
are
of course-
voted and certified, because we also have, and the problem is, realistically, you can't have this hearing open before November.
That's correct.
And realistically, you have to have the stuff done if you're going to start working on the rates by beginning of December.
That's correct.
So you really only have that
Just
1 month of
brief
November.
window.
Well, we're not, I'm not talking about specific
Mm-hmm.
rates. I'm talking about just public input on the topic in general.
But you can't advertise the hearing, is what he's
Right.
saying, and have the data from the assessors until it's certified.
Even with this committee's, I contacted the DOR to be sure, can I conduct meetings in front of selectmen without publishing something in the paper? Because all of this has to be published in the paper in advance of the meetings. They assured me, in this case I didn't, because I wasn't discussing fiscal 19. I was discussing sort of retrospectively. All 18 data is what I gave the committee to kind of look at. So all those discussions were perfectly legitimate. However, once we now begin to turn our attention to fiscal 19, as Paul alluded to, we have to begin to make sure everything is timed right. Certainly we want to do as early as possible, but we can't do any sooner than certain dates.
So you better get cracking.
Exactly.
But he can't get ahead of the town meeting either. That's the
right.
problem, because what ends up happening is part of that, for example, he has to explain how much excess levy capacity we have. But you don't have that until the town meeting votes are in, and then the appeal period, and then it's certified by the Department of Revenue. So that's the problem, is it's one big bundle that includes not only the split rates, but also the certification of values, and
That's
also the excess levy capacity.
That's
and,
right.
and then the overlay approved by the state. So that all can't get done until, realistically, beginning of November. And no matter how hard you work. I mean, if
That's
you had
right.
it done,
I
if
can
you
only
had
take
your
it so
values
far.
done today, you can't
Right.
get ahead of the
They
town
just sit
meeting.
there. Then I pull in the other departments. Darlene gets pulled into this, and my
Right.
boss, John Souza.
Right.
As we enter into the recap and the tax rating set.
And think about what happened. This year, the earliest possible date for fall town meeting is occurring, October 15th. We won't get out of that town meeting till, let's say it goes 3 sessions to the 22nd, right?
Right.
Well, then you have the 7-day period
Right.
of no action, and then you got to certify the Department of Revenue. Now you're at the beginning of November.
And we're in
That's
we're in the
problem.
queue with 300 of my other colleagues.
Well, we've eliminated one night with the chickens.
Right, but anyway, I just don't want,
Oh, absolutely.
All right, well then, unless anyone has anything else to say, in closing, again, I want to thank members of the committee who did yeoman's work. And remember, the town is always looking for a few people to step up for these special committees that are lots of fun, and we hope to see you again.
I do want to take a moment on behalf of the Board of Assessors to commend the committee members. They met every week, basically gave up their entire summer to do this report at an accelerated pace. And I gave them a lot of data that they had to digest and not a lot of time to do it. I think they did a commendable job, a terrific job. And it's going to be a resource for all the communities to look at. So I thank them, too, for their cooperation.
Thank you.
Right there on desktop. Might minimize that, it'll be right there. in the, Article 2.
Now we're at the recommendations for the town meeting warrant articles.
Yeah, we completed action on 6 the other evening. We've got 17 to go, and we'll try to go as quickly as we can.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
First article is Article 1, which is report, so there's no action, no vote by that. The only report that we will have would be the report, the 5-year financial forecast by the finance director. The town manager's 5-year forecast will be presented by the finance director. Article 2 is funding for collective bargaining agreements. We only have the one, which is for the arbitration award between the town of Chelmsford and the Chelmsford Police Association Fraternal Order of Police, which is the patrol officers. The funding request under this is $158,000 and $23 from free cash to fund this agreement. You'll see quickly the agreement, and I guess this will sort of help us get a head start on the later item. It funds the 3 fiscal years period, the 2 fiscal years we've already completed, and the 3rd year that we're in now, which we're entering our 4th month. The essence of the agreement is the paid work week increases from 37.5 hours to 40 hours with no change in schedule effective January 1st, 2019. The wage schedule increases 0.5% for each fiscal year, so it compounds 0.5% for each fiscal year. And then the shift differential for the 2nd and 3rd shift increases from $1.73 per hour to $2 per hour. The town received firearms training time would be addressed as compensatory time instead of paid overtime. And the light duty has been referred to the further action, and we hope to have that resolved by the end of the calendar year. If not, it'll go back to the arbitrator.
Is that
we
the
are-
only one that has, that's the status of it, light duty?
No, the firefighters had light duty in their arbitration award, and it's on the table for the police superior officers, the sergeants union.
Same, it's on arbitration.
Right. You are bound under state law to recommend affirmative action to this at town meeting. So that's why there's no vote by this board to approve the arbitration award or accept the arbitration award. We have to present it favorably at town meeting. Town meeting then gets to decide whether or not to fund it. And if it's funded, then it becomes effective. If it's not funded, then it goes back to the bargaining table. So that's the only agreement we have under this article. Again, the costing was done by the town accountant. The only other contract that we have outstanding is the police superior officers or the sergeants union for the 7 sergeants in the town. And that arbitration hearing resumes on October 19th, which will be following the fall town meeting session. So that's the request under this warrant article is the 158,023, and Finance Committee did recommend approval of this article.
One question, Paul, what happens if that's approved one way or the other after the town meeting?
Then we'd have to come back at a future
Special
town
meeting?
meeting. Well, it'd be either that or we'd wait till the spring annual town meeting. We'll have to, even if we were to finish the hearing on October 19th, you then would probably have a 45-day window for post-hearing briefs, then the arbitrator's award. So at that point, you're probably into January. The question would then become, do you call a special town meeting at that time and expense, or do you just wait till April? Because they're going to get their money retroactive.
Yeah.
And there is some, perhaps there's still a glimmer of hope that it could get resolved prior to that. We did
Before town
receive.
meeting, you mean,
Yeah,
or-
we did receive a offer since the arbitration hearing from the Superior Officers Union, which we'll discuss in executive session. So there is a chance that perhaps that might get resolved outside of arbitration by the time of the 2 weeks from tonight. So you need to vote. And again, you really don't have a choice on this
Right.
vote. You have to recommend.
Recommend to
favorably.
approval, Articles 2 for the town meeting fall warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
Okay, Article 3 is an amendment to the current fiscal year operating budget. Again, it began on July 1st, we're now into our 4th month. Just have one adjustment, and that is to appropriate $33,681 to budget line item number 12, Community Services, Personnel Services. And what this would do is this would fund the position of an additional full-time health inspector beginning in December. Because again, if we leave town meeting the end of October, we think we could get somebody on board by December. What's gone on here, go to the next slide, is there's been a 10% increase in food-related establishments over the past 2 years, and a 40% increase, as you can see, from 10 to 14 per month in Board of Health complaints in the past year pertaining to nuisances such as noise, odor, trash, rodents, so forth. And basically what I've been informed by the health director that the health department has not been able to fulfill the required inspections of food establishments in a timely manner. And if you go to the next slide, you'll sort of see that the routine inspections are 204. Again, the amount of inspections varies depending upon the type of facility. The bottom line is not all the work is getting done, and to me, this is a paramount public health issue. I mean, one of the core fundamental issues we do in a community is we provide public safety, public health, public education, and here I'm being notified, and also wasn't just notified, I then looked at data from comparable communities, such as Tewksbury and so forth, and we are low. I mean, we're only staffed by one health inspector. The norm is about an inspector and a half when you look at a community like Tewksbury and so forth. The request from the Board of Health, in which I support, would be to go to two full-time inspectors, because I think, as we see, it's not just food establishments. There have been a number of health concerns in the community, and that would get us to where we need to be.
Do
So
they
you
have
can
to have
see.
any
Yeah.
special training?
Oh, yeah, you get a certification as a health
do?
inspector. Yeah, it's not just hire somebody from the street. You go to classes and certification and training. But it worries me when you see that double asterisk at the bottom, when the health inspector was not able to inspect 74 of the 204 required in 2017. That's a real problem. And to say that it can't happen here is not true. As you know, the Board of Health has closed establishments in the community for health violations, and certainly just check the stuff that's gone on in the area in terms of health concerns. So I would ask your support, and the Finance Committee did recommend funding for this position. So again, it's $33,681.
Do you have a motion?
I'll recommend approval for Article 3 for the fall
Second.
town warrant.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Article 4 is the stormwater fiscal year 2019 Stormwater Management Enterprise Fund. Steve Yonley's been waiting for a long time to address the board on this article, so we'll turn the microphone over to Steve.
Hi, good evening. Stephen Yonley, Assistant Public Works Director. The short version is this is the budget that was approved a year and a half ago. But instead of for a year, it's only for 6 months. So basically what we did was cut it in half. That's the quick version. Capital items are still kind of the same, how they were modified at town meeting, because obviously you need some vehicles. The office build-out's still there. In the regular budget, the stormwater master plan, if you remember the lengthy presentation from a year and a half ago, was a key component. That's still in there, but all the rest of the line items were more or less cut in half. So this will proceed as it was approved at town meeting a year and a half ago. It's just the budget looks a little funny because it's only for 6 months.
How soon will people start seeing requests for their individual contributions?
They will go on the sewer bills beginning in January.
Do we know
so
how
the
much
half
that
year.
will be at this point?
The amount of the bill increase in January?
$20.
About $20.
Like how you phrase it, Glenn.
What?
Request for their contribution.
Yeah.
Well, I don't like to talk about taxes.
Well, it isn't. It's a fee.
Fees.
It's a fee.
Fees.
It's a fee.
Not deductible.
It's not deductible.
So this is the way it was approved.
Correct.
Now.
Yeah. Basically, what the federal government did is they delayed for a year and changed nothing. So it was just postponed for a year, and then it became effective 3 months ago. And neither has the litigation that was also part of this hasn't been resolved either.
No.
So basically, this is now rolling out exactly as we foresaw 18 months ago. But now we're 3 months behind in the current year, and we're just going to ramp up. And that's why last meeting you approved that submission of the notice of intent when Christina Papadopoulos was here which was required to be in effect, it'd be submitted by today.
At what point last year did they rescind it? After town meeting?
No, yeah, it was after town meeting. It was like 4 days before it was become effective. I think it was like June 26th.
Yeah, it worked about the same as when they executed the stay the year prior.
Yeah.
It was like a week before, or the end of June 27th or something, we get the notice that it's on hold, where everybody had gone through town meetings. And now they did the same thing in reverse. They waited till everybody was through town meeting and then told everybody they got to do it. So
Maybe you better save your notes.
Yeah, it's just puzzling from an administration in Washington to talk about not opposing regulations. And I think the reason why this wasn't done is because these stormwater regulations are already in effect in more than a majority of the states across the country.
Correct.
And so I think that's why they were caught. And so they said, well, just let it go.
We have a motion?
I will recommend approval for Article 4 for the fall town meeting.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I vote.
thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, Article 5 and 6 we did last time. Article 7 is for the Chelmsford Open Space Stewards. That was the request for $3,000 from free cash to maintain the town-owned conservation, agricultural, and open space lands. You discussed this. Your
Finance approved it
Finance approved it.
completely. We talked about it. It's for our equipment and materials. We have a motion?
Make a motion to recommend approval for Article 7 for the fall town warrant.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. I vote.
Thank you. Article 8 is the Vinyl Square Survey and Portable Tree Planters, and I'll turn this one over to Mike, because Mike's been the liaison for the Vinyl Square effort for this project.
Mr. Chairman, there's two things here. They're looking for money to be transferred to do the survey of the square, looking at the right-of-way, the road, and where things can be placed along the sidewalk, as well as the $10,000 to purchase and install the portable planters for the trees in the vinyl square. As many of you may know, the master plan, the vinyl square strategic action plan, I should say, as well as one of the NIMCOG studies indicated that traffic is an issue as well as aesthetics in the square. So both of the items here would be addressing, assessing the traffic and the right-of-way, as well as adding beautification to the square.
Evan, do you have anything you want to add to that? He's got a couple slides we can probably pop up there.
In fact, there's a couple of state roads there.
You want to bring up this
Yeah, it's going to keep going. Keep going. Right there.
Go to the next one. Yeah. So this, good evening. This slide depicts the survey area. It covers the square as well as the roadways into the square. If you look closely at this plan, this is a conceptual improvement plan. Once a survey is done, it's these kinds of improvements, streetscape, transportation, traffic, circulation, parking, enhancements and improvements that could be made. But the first step is within the state process, is that the town needs to bring the project to 25%. So the first step is to do a survey. The $25,000 will cover the full-blown survey for the town to be able to pursue a state transportation improvement project. That is a long-term project, 7 to 10 year horizon. To get to that point, I think later this evening you'll be hearing about a similar town-initiated transportation improvement project. So this is a similar course. The survey also provides a short-term benefit, which is the permit process that MassDOT requires for placement of trees, planters within their right-of-way. This entire road area is owned and maintained primarily by the state. So the majority of the sidewalk is within state jurisdiction. So as I indicated, the committee's short-term goal is to get MassDOT approval to place either trees or tree planters on the sidewalk for short-term beautification. That requires a survey to be done anyway. Simultaneously, the full-blown survey will serve as intermediate and long-term implementation per their master plan.
Who does the survey, actually?
So we will be hiring that out. Be a local survey company. I will say, between now and town meeting, the Vinyl Square Committee is in coordination with the Tree Committee. For town meeting, we want to have some basic questions answered in anticipation of questions related to, how do the trees get managed during the winter time? Do they get removed? Who does it? How do they get watered? So we're not going to have the final answers for town meeting, but we will, at a minimum, be able to present that there continues to be coordination and conversation between the Vinyl Square Committee, the Tree Committee, and DPW.
I have a question about the tree planters. They're going to be placed on the sidewalks?
Correct.
Doesn't that impede?
So they would have to comply with ADA,
Okay.
which I believe is 5 feet, I believe. So there are portions of the sidewalk where tree planters will not be able to meet that minimum standard. We expect that there may be an opportunity for upwards of 10 within the study area.
Okay.
We already have planters there on different locations.
We have small planters. Yeah, these would be planters that can hold a dwarf tree, not a full-blown tree that can, grow up into the wires, and something that can be potentially movable.
Like the
And
one they had on the
manageable.
common? They had a couple of big ones on the common.
Yeah, I mean, they'd be substantial enough where they couldn't kind of walk off, can't be vandalized, things of that nature. So there's research that needs to be done, and that's why we'll continue to work with the Tree Committee and DPW.
Any questions?
Is Tainsboro Road considered a state road as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I thought. Thank you.
Do you have an idea, a plan in mind for those trees?
So the species have not been picked out. As I said, that level of detail, the committee hasn't talked about. They're in the process of having conversations with the Tree Committee. That information may be available for town meeting, but there's a variety of other decisions that need to be made. For example, what kind of planter? What's the size of the planter? The size of the planter, the material of the planter may dictate what kind of tree you put in there. It may not even be a tree, it may be an evergreen. So there's a variety of decisions that need to be made. This request, I think from the committee's perspective, is to request a funding to be able to do the due diligence with the condition that MassDOT approves the location of planters to begin with.
Yeah, and at their meetings, they have discussed, who's going to water them, who will take them away. So I think all of that factors into what type of tree.
Right.
And I don't think, we haven't had the tree committee actually come to.
Correct.
yet.
They've been attending but not presenting
Yeah,
any
we're not
findings.
presenting. So it's been great to have their input, but they just haven't arrived at what type of tree yet until we know the details of who's going to water, who's going to actually remove them. So that type of information will dictate the size of the tree.
There's a sort of global movement, and it's bigger or smaller depending on which town you're talking about. But there's a public food movement where there would be, tomatoes and cucumbers or whatever planted, and seasonal planters in particular. But, anywhere you have space for a raised bed and your standard sort of hostas and daylily arrangement, you could put food there. And
I have a feeling if you planted tomatoes and cucumbers in these trees, sooner or later, no cucumbers, no tomatoes.
that's the point. That's the point. It's
You don't have to go anywhere, you just stop and grab one as you're going by.
That's the
You
whole
could be apple
point.
picking in Vinyl Square.
No, because when you have to spray those apples, you're going to have people screaming
that's
about
true.
pesticides. So no, it's not going to work.
I lived in Spain. We had bitter orange trees growing on all the streets. You could pick them and make your marmalade if you wanted,
Bring that up at the tree committee.
Yeah, we'll see how Jim takes that.
All right, do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve Article 8 for the fall town warrant. Recommend approval for Article 8 of the fall town.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Article 9 is the appropriation from the Commonwealth Transportation Infrastructure Fund. This is the first of what will be an annual vote at fall town meeting. And you can see the whopping amount of $5,035.80. Where this originated from was back in 2016, the legislature formally regulated the alternative transportation, or which was the ride share. And basically they put a 20-cent per ride assessment. Half the assessment goes to the Massachusetts Department of Public Utilities, which regulates that activity, and half goes to the community where the ride originates. So you can imagine, the town had 50,000 rides in the calendar year 2017, so we were able to get $5,035.80. And again, the Department of Revenue has determined that town meeting must appropriate the funds to the account, and then at the end of the calendar year, we have to report to the state how we expended the monies. And they have to be used for the transportation infrastructure on network services and such. And so what we're proposing to do is utilize this funds to improve the crosswalk at Omni Way and Billerica Road as what's part of a larger project there, because of the fact that we now have DCF and facilities at that location. So that's how the money will be utilized, but we have to have town meeting vote to appropriate the $5,035.80.
You have a motion?
Recommend approval of Article 9 for the fall town warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 5-0.
Thank you. Article 10 is the easements for Billerica Road and River Neck Road intersection. Again, this was the project Evan referred to earlier about the major redesign of the Billerica Road and River Neck Road intersection, and Steve Yonley is here to discuss the easements that are required.
Hi, good evening again. This project right down the street with the intersection at Billerica Road and River Neck Road has been kind of in the queue with Mass DOT for about 3 years, is finally kind of accelerating into potential construction for like a year from now, maybe. So what it is, the next step, we've been through some public hearings, some utility coordination hearings. The next step is coordination with some easements that are needed for either utilities, sidewalk. Some are just temporary for erosion control, trimming a tree, seeding the lawn after construction, that type of thing. Here's a graphic showing the actual construction and the limits of the project. Goes from Golden Cove Turnpike Road intersection on Billerica Road, all the way down to Industrial Drive by Community Tree Service, and then realigning the intersection at Riverneck Road, widening out for bike lanes at a turn lane to make the left turn up Riverneck Road, and then the project extends up Riverneck Road, a little more than 450 feet, I believe. Again, sidewalks, widening out the culvert right by Workers' Credit Union, which is, if you drive down there, it's a big pinch point in the road. It's tough to walk by, clearly can't really bike by it. And if you look at the guardrail there, the guardrails are flat from people basically skimming along the side of it. So this project, like I say, has been in the queue with DOT for a few years. It's accelerated now with NIMCOG's help and stuff. Like I say, they've had a slot because some other projects got pushed back. This one out on getting moved up into a fiscal 2019 construction. So like I say, it'll need to be out to bid late next spring, early summer for fall construction. So again, these easements, and the majority of these easements are either on town of Chelmsford land or Chelmsford Water District land. A lot of it is the cemetery. I've met with the cemetery commissioners. The water department is aware. They've been on some of the utility walks. Again, they call for easements on like the common in front of Workers' Credit Union. Clearly, it's town land. The town owns a piece of land down at the corner of Industrial and Billerica Road. There's some drainage easements there. And a few of these easements that are on residential property, private property, are for utilities that are already there that just don't have easement for whatever reason. There's an anchor wire off a telephone pole or an overhead easement for aerial lines. So it's just kind of cleaning that all up, a lot of that stuff through the process. So again, if this goes through town meeting to authorize the selectmen to obtain these easements, obviously I don't think we have to obtain them from ourselves. But on the residential properties, we'll reach out to them from my office. We get appraisals based on what the easement's needed for, and then any money, a lot of times temporary ones, typically $1, because it's just temporary. You know, again, we got to reseed your grass after construction comes by, or, you know, simple things, just putting up some erosion control. If it's a permanent one, again, to get appraisal, could be $100, something like that. I mean, the smallest easement's only 11 square feet. You know, it's tiny for like a guy wire off a pole or something like that. The largest ones are a few thousand feet, but again, that's on either town land or cemetery land. So the residential properties aren't heavily impacted as far as, you know, taking an easement. Any monies that would have to be spent to acquire an easement, I would have in our roadway capital budget that's approved every spring. There's a small line item in that budget typically for easements and engineering, if needed.
How long will it take to complete?
They're estimating a 2-year project. There's some pretty extensive utilities. If you're familiar with that corridor, there's a lot of fiber optic networks that run through there. There's a lot of utilities off the side of the culvert now. There's a water line on one side, gas line, and fiber ducts on the other side. There's a few poles along the cemetery that have to move, and then obviously it's a full culvert replacement in order to get the width needed for the lanes and bike lane sidewalks type.
And the actual cost of the project is an hour?
The DOT estimate is just shy of $5 million. So that's all funded by the state. How this works, as Evan spoke of earlier, it's a transportation improvement project. The town funds the design and any easement takings that have to happen, and Mass DOT funds the construction.
Is there any labor expenditure by your team?
It's just my time.
Just over, kind of watching over it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm working with the consultants through the design and permitting process, and then, as with any of these other projects, the center was one, North Road at the signals at Dalton, and then Parkhurst and Davis, and then the rest of the Parkhurst Road with the Smith Street realignment. Those were these type of projects, so we're involved with the, you know, weekly construction meetings, or, because at the end of the day, it's our road, so we are involved. But DOT provides the oversight, day-to-day oversight, but if there's any issue, we're clearly involved.
There's been some discussions about putting an arm from the Bruce Friedman Rail Trail all the way to 129, having a bike lane. Is that
Yeah,
Is there enough room if that gets added to,
the bike lane will get you up to the traffic signal as part of this project.
so if the town wanted to address that, then they'd have to just go from the traffic signal down to the
Yeah,
bike path?
you'd have to widen
Well, the
the
rail
control
trail.
a little bit, yep.
Yeah, okay.
Any other discussion? Have a motion?
Make a motion, recommend approval for Article 10 of the Fall Town Meeting warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All?
Thank you, Steve. Next article is Article 10, as was requested, I'm sorry, 11. It was Article 11. As was requested, there was a request to put an article on the warrant to utilize free cash to reduce the property tax levy. I'm recommending no action under this article. If you go to Article 12, I'll explain why. I'm requesting that the town transfer $712,880 from free cash to the general stabilization fund. If you go to the next slide, you'll see the basis for that. Right now, our stabilization fund balance is $9.7 million. Back at the spring annual town meeting, we transferred out $180,000. We had to fund the fire department settlement. We also had to fund some winter cost overruns. We also reduced the reserve fund at the spring annual town meeting by $245,000. And we have funding also needed to fund the pending or hopefully future police superior office contract. So what I'm recommending is to take the balance of free cash that's available at the 712. And as you can see, once you net out those other costs, it's, you're down to a few $100,000 to put it into the stabilization fund for future appropriation by the community.
How would that be presented at town meeting?
What do you mean?
We're saying we don't take any action on
Then
10.
there'd be no action. There'd be no action under
Would you
Article
be saying
10.
the same thing at town meeting?
Yes. Yeah, there would be no action under the article.
Because you
Similar
chose
to
11
similar-
instead
yeah,
of it.
similar to the withdrawal of the chicken article and zoning and so forth, there would be no action.
Would it been, in hindsight, would have been better to put 11 before 10? So if you adopted 11 of 10,
We can
then
vote.
11 went away. It's kind of putting the.
It's the chicken or the egg. I mean, one of them's got to come first.
Okay.
Yeah, so I
It's
mean,
just, you wouldn't have to explain why you're passing over 10 and getting to 11 first. You'd do 11.
11 and 12. yeah.
you could do 11 and 12. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know. I mean, it's
All right, so we.
Why was this article on?
because we had a request from a town meeting representative to have an article placed on the warrant to utilize free cash to reduce the tax levy. It was Paul Regazio. The board
So-
recalls having that.
Yeah, and just, so if the article's not there, then he can't amend. But
Right.
having it there with no number, he can then amend and have the option to change the numbers at town meeting.
Okay,
That's why it's there.
okay,
But if I take no action, then it's not put on the floor of town meeting.
right.
But can he amend this?
No.
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 So why is the number $63,000 different than our packet?
Oh, it's because the 63,000 was the number that there were a couple of changes. One is you reduced the funding for the,
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
yeah, for the CCA.
Yep.
And you also reduced the article for the study of the fire station ambulance.
Okay.
That's why it changed.
So in this way, are you making it so that there is no opportunity for someone to amend the warrants to fund rebates back on taxes?
Well, there's no rebates. It would use.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
return of cash.
Yeah, right. I mean, unless, I'm open to hear from this board if that's what you'd like to do.
No.
But I did what, at the time we placed the warrant, we didn't know, when we started this back in the summer, we didn't know what the free cash would come in at. What I'm saying is the amount now is so minimal that I think it makes more sense for the town to put it into the stabilization fund to meet the needs that are coming in the future, which are considerable.
I mean, I would agree with that, and I would, recommend approval of this. But I think it, just as a courtesy, if nothing else, it might make sense to do 12 before
Sure,
11.
okay.
And then
We'll take it out
if
of
somebody
order.
wants to amend this down to 700,000 and put $12,000 in tax relief. I know it's meaningless.
No, but it's the chicken and egg problem, because
know.
if I do 12 first and it gets voted, then if they want to do 11, then they have to reconsider the appropriation under 12. So you'd have to have a motion to
Well, then it's-
reconsider the vote to change.
They could say the whole 649 if you made it 12, right?
Right, but that's what I'm saying. One
Like
has to
that.
go first, because
But
if you.
But if it's all voted in 12, then there's nothing for 11, is what I'm
Right.
saying.
But if I do 11, if I do 11 afterwards and they appropriate the money in 12,
Then there's nothing to
then there's nothing
appropriate.
to appropriate.
So,
What if you're would it be opening a can of worms if you said stabilization fund balance, 649 to free cash and 0 to?
Yeah, I mean, I will discuss it. at the
Because
time.
that way you could amend it.
Right.
If you put another option here that, and no money returned to taxpayers, you could amend that.
Right, I'll ask the moderator to pass over Article 11 and then go to 12, and if there's discussion on the 12, we can go back to 11.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
I
what
think
do we
that's
do
the way to
tonight?
do it.
Recommend approval?
Well, you got to make some recommendation, yeah, under 12 and 11.
I just feel,
But I agree, so
I don't want to close
no
the
action.
door so that
Right, so I
so
won't.
you're cornering them in that they
Right.
can't amend it.
So that's why I say, I'll ask that we pass over 11 to get to 12 and then
Take it
come
out of
back.
order.
Take it out of order, if that's the
Okay.
case.
But we still have to take a vote on 11 tonight?
Well, yeah, because by logic, if you follow the recommendation under 12, there's no money left under 11.
Okay, so,
So the town meeting's gonna wanna know, what do the selectmen want to do with the balance in free cash, is what it comes down to.
of which there be none.
Right, or do you wish to do something different? I mean, you can recommend against 12.
So-
and-
We're recommending 12.
Well,
well, we haven't voted yet.
you haven't voted yet.
Well, I'm saying
If you were to
one
recommend.
or the other.
If you were to recommend the requested amount under 12,
Then we
there'll be no money left to do, to
Right.
Would we vote
reduce the levy.
against the other one then?
That would have to be your choice. If you said, no, we're only gonna.
But it still goes, even if we vote against it.
It's still going to be presented.
Right, but at town meeting, that would at least give the opportunity for the town meeting reps to amend 12 and
Right.
then use the
Exactly,
money
and
to
that's
fund
what
11.
we'll do.
Yeah.
But the question's gonna come after
Got
the
it.
discussion and the motion. They're gonna say, what's the Board of Selectmen's recommendation? And we have to have an answer to that
We need a
question.
recommendation on both of them.
Right.
Right.
So, yeah, we got to keep it open. So I will, which one do you want to take first, 12? or-
12.
I think you gotta do 12.
I will recommend approval for Article 12 for the fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, George? Yeah. Aye, Vol?
Now what do we do with 11?
At this point,
action.
it would be no action.
Okay.
But I will leave that door open, just as the board suggested.
But it will still be there for them to amend if
Yes.
they
Yes,
seem.
yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Good. I just want to make sure.
No, because that's what we committed to. That's
Yep.
what we committed to.
Yep, we were very clear that we would
Yeah.
give the opportunity for
Right.
them to amend it at town meeting if they
And I'm
felt
sure there'll be discussion.
Yes.
I bet there will be.
at another night.
Another night, okay. Article 13 is the reconstruction of the ninth hole green at the Chelmsford Country Club. The requested amount is $86,500, and I'll let Michael present this.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we're looking for $86,500 from the Golf Course Enterprise Fund to make improvements which would reconstruct the ninth hole at Chelmsford Country Club. The current balance in the enterprise fund is $119,265. That comes from the annual payments that they make, which is at a minimum 10% of their annual revenues, no less than, I believe, it's $30,000. And so they haven't made any significant improvements, so they've been building up this balance. Kevin Osgood, who runs he's from Sterling Golf Management, not only does he manage this golf course, he manages others, and he believes firmly that they need some improvements both on the ninth and the second hole. The ninth being more critical. It's the last hole on the golf course. If you've been there, it's kind of the last step before you go to the clubhouse. And it's the one that they think would drastically improve the return on revenue. He had indicated in a letter to me that improvements upon the ninth green would yield approximately a 10% increase in the revenue, and he projects an increase from the fees up to $40,000. This is an aerial shot. On the bottom half of the screen, you see the first hole, and then coming the other way from right to left at the top of the screen is the ninth hole. This shows you the topography of the land. If you'll notice that at the high point, just before the green, it's 220 feet above sea level, and then it slopes down towards the green, and it also slopes down towards the tee box. So what you have is a slight rise. You can start to see a little bit of a curvature on this particular picture of the green. They're looking to move the green forward. I'll show you in a moment. But right now, where the two red arrows are, the balls tend to roll towards the back, and they have a bunker at the back to catch them before they go into the woods. This is the shot of the existing fairway from the tee box. You can't see the green. So what they're hoping to do is to move the green right onto the middle of that rise and make other improvements. This is a proposed drawing. You can see the outline of the new green area as it would move back to the rise. They would also create some additional bunkers, sand traps, and change the topography around the end of the green. They think this will increase play, not only due to the aesthetics, but change the course, make it more playable. They also are looking at the fact that Tingsboro is looking at closing down. They've had some inquiries from other golfers as well as leagues from Tingsboro and the surrounding areas to come and utilize more of the Chelmsford golf course, and they think with these improvements as advertised, that would bring in more revenue for the club and in turn more money into the enterprise fund. So they're asking for your recommendation on this.
They're only doing the ninth hole. They're not doing 9 and 2.
No, they're just doing 9 now.
Shorten the hole a little bit, maybe.
Just a little bit. Eventually what they would like to do with the second hole in the future is to move it. If you've ever played it, it's 90 degrees to the first hole, and the green is actually located to the far right of the fairway, very close to the private property. So a lot of the balls tend to hook into the woods, generating complaints. So what they would like to do is eventually reconstruct that hole a little bit more to the left of the fairway.
Are you a golfer?
From time to time.
You have a certain suave way of talking about this, like
Oh.
you're...
Well, I spend a lot of time talking to Kevin. I have played on the golf course numerous times over the years. I try and get out there at least once a year with my kids. So,
Let's change it from a par 5 to a par 4.
that I don't know. I don't even think
They're
that
both
last one
par
is a
threes.
par 5.
Par 3.
Yeah.
I like their approach, though. You get a nice, easy hole at the end, you make it look good, and you walk off thinking you just had a great round. You forget about the first 10. Well, actually, it's only 9, so the first 8, yeah.
8. You have a motion?
Motion to recommend approval
Second.
for, hold on, I'm not done.
13.
Article 13 for the town warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
All right.
5-0.
Article 14 is a request to transfer $10,000 from the Cable Television Public Educational and Governmental Access Enterprise Fund free cash to purchase a utility trailer to haul cable access equipment. Again, this is a standalone fund where the balance left over from the prior year is kept in the fund, and it's a replacement trailer that is needed. So, Finance Committee recommends approval. And we'll probably do this under consent agenda with a couple of other de minimis articles like the on the warrant.
Recommend approval for Article 14 for this fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Article 15 is another probably consent agenda item. It's to transfer an additional $75,000 from the sale of lots and graves to the Cemetery Improvement and Development Fund, which is for the ongoing expansion at the Pine Ridge Cemetery. As you know, they've cleared 7 acres over there. Tree stumps have been removed, and initial grading and loam have been completed. Now they've got to get into the fencing and layout and utilities in that area in terms of water lines and dry wells and catch basins. And then ultimately, it'll be final loam and seeding in a couple of years. Finance Committee recommends approval.
Recommend approval for Article 15 of the fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
Now we go to the 4 remaining zoning articles. Article 16 is the display of flags at commercial properties. Evan Belansky's here. You can see the language is shown on the next slide, which is the clarification language we think will resolve the issue with the display of official flags that we experienced this past summer.
Good evening. This is a fairly minor and straightforward zoning amendment. Currently, as you likely know, the zoning bylaw regulates the display of the U.S. flag or any governmental flag if and when it becomes associated with commercial promotion. Commercial promotion is a determination that is done solely by the building zoning commissioner. And that's what led to the scenario this past summer. Since that time, town officials listening to the community, working with the planning board and the leadership of the Board of Selectmen, ultimately came to the conclusion and proposal to eliminate all zoning regulation related to the display of the United States flag or any other governmental entity flag. So if this proposal is passed at town meeting, as I mentioned, any and all displays related to the number, the size, the type, the location of the United States flag or other governmental entity flags would not be regulated under zoning.
Any questions? We have a motion.
I'll make a motion, no, I'll recommend approval for Article 18 for the fall. Oh, I'm sorry, Article 16 for the fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
I vote.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next article we've done, 17 has been withdrawn, as we know, and 18 is the zoning bylaw amendment regarding historical preservation and reuse. And I'll ask Evan to explain. This is a very lengthy article, but I think he can summarize it pretty succinctly.
Sure, so thank you again. So over the years, most of the zoning articles that go to town meeting have been related to economic development and commercial, industrial type zoning. This article relates to historic preservation. And this initiated with the 2010 master plan. There was the first time that this notion of historic preservation being used as a tool for zoning was mentioned. Then in 2013, in the historical and cultural master plan, it was reemphasized and with a little bit more focus. Since then, it's been taken a number of years to get to this point. But most recently, the planning board, particularly Nancy Arroway, has been working with the Chelmsford Historical Commission to develop this bylaw and articulate the need and the strategy behind it. The Historical Commission does support this article. And essentially, this article proposes to promote, encourage, and incentivize the historic preservation, primarily of single-family homes that are fairly prominent throughout town. It does that via several provisions and mechanisms, one of which is to convert a single-family home into a two-family home with a special permit from the planning board. And a new provision is to convert a single-family home into a three-family home. In addition, this bylaw also introduces the concept of using detached accessory structures, which could be a large barn, or a detached accessory structure, converting those to residential purposes as well. The third and final option that this bylaw introduces for purposes of providing financial incentive to have a historical preservation is to create a new lot, a new buildable lot that would be used to build a new home in exchange for historically preserving the existing historic house. The carrot and stick approach here is that those zoning incentives are provided in exchange for the historical house being placed under a local historic covenant, similar to what you did with 101 Mill Road. Nothing to do with a state mass historic preservation restriction. This bylaw specifically mentions a local historic covenant or restrictive covenant that would be negotiated by the Historical Commission. So that's the bylaw in a nutshell, but as I mentioned, both the Historical Commission as well as the Planning Board and I believe Finance Committee have recommended approval.
Do you have a motion?
Yes.
I have a
Go ahead.
question. So you mentioned 101 Mill Road. How would this impact 101 Mill Road, if at all?
It wouldn't, because we'd have a deed restriction in 101 Mill Road.
Oh, okay.
We have this.
That would overrule the zoning bylaw.
Okay.
But if you had a property like 101 Mill Road that was similar, then what could happen is what Evan described. You could preserve the property and then cut off a separate lot.
Correct.
Okay.
So 101 was kind of used as a blueprint for this.
I think it simplified the historical covenant conversation.
Erie.
Yes, absolutely. It was a good dry run.
And you've also seen in town where some of this has already gone on, where someone has a historic building but then adds a structure, barn-like structure to it for more units, and that helps maintain the historic building out front while allowing them to generate income to
Correct.
reinvest back in the
Correct.
house.
So even though the Chelmsford is not experiencing a tremendous amount of demolitions of historic structures, increasingly due to the market demands and pressures, these structures are increasingly under pressure for either partial demolition or full demolition. So this is somewhat ahead of its time. It may be 2, 3, 5 years, 10 years ahead of its time, but this is certainly a tool that the Historical Commission can use right now as part of their demo delay. And it's certainly a community value. There's a reason that people move to town and specifically buy historic structures.
And I'm watching Nancy and Historic Commission go through this. They were really thorough in the process here, right down to the color of the building, like the paint, so I think it was pretty well written, watching them do this.
Do you have a motion?
I will recommend approval for Article 18 of the Fall Town Warrant.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
Okay, Article 19 is the zoning bylaw amendment to revise the definition of a multifamily dwelling.
Thank you. So this one, again, is fairly straightforward, but it provides a significant amendment. So currently, the zoning bylaw within definitions defines multifamily as one structure that contains 3 or more units within that single structure. That is also mirrored within the RM multifamily zoning bylaw. In essence, what the town has basically said by defining multifamily as 3 or more units in one structure is that it wants central corridor, which usually turns out to be rental developments. You certainly could build a triplex of townhouses, and we do have some of those around town. What the proposed revision would do is to add a new sentence, keeping the existing three units within one structure and adding a new sentence saying that 3 units in any configuration can be detached or attached on a single lot and be accessory to. And what that would do is it would specifically allow for 3 or more detached individual dwelling units on one lot, which would, in other words, simply stated, would be a townhouse-style development. The reason that the planning board has proposed this bylaw is one that they became aware of the existing definition. They thought that that was somewhat restrictive, and they also believe, based upon community input and feedback when they do their multifamily reviews, that the town has a sentiment and desire to encourage and promote detached townhouse-style development, which more often than not would lead to ownership units as opposed to rental units.
So, is that a description of Williamsburg?
Williamsburg is, aren't they multiple units in one large?
1s, 2s, 3s?
So this definition would permit Williamsburg-style development. A better example would be Stonegate, which is a classic individual single units rather than some of them that are grouped together. I believe Windermere, even though that was a 40B, that also is detached single-family townhouse development. So at the end of the day, this will diversify the housing stock. Some of the recent multifamily development projects that have been in front of the planning board along Turnpike, as a good example. The neighborhood, I think, preference was townhouse-style development. This would provide the planning board as well as the neighborhood that opportunity to pursue townhouse-style development, single units, multiple single units, more than 3 on one lot. So it provides another option that could be more compatible with the community as well as the neighborhood.
Any questions? Motion?
Recommend approval, Article 19 for the fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
And then the final zoning article on the falling town meeting warrant is Article 20. This would remove the parcels located at 278 and 282 Mill Road from the commercial exclusion zone in the Route 129 Business Amenities Overlay District.
There's some visuals on this one? Okay. So last Wednesday evening, the planning board opened this hearing and closed it and voted unanimously to recommend approval at town meeting. As you can see on the visual here, this is two half-acre parcels. It totals 1 acre. It's under common ownership. It is located across from Lifelinks and adjacent to Princeton at Mill. This, in 2016, as part of the Route 129 Business Amenity Overlay District, these two parcels were included in what was referred to as the commercial exclusion zone. The commercial exclusion zone begins at these two parcels. So the parcel, one parcel up is outside of the commercial exclusion zone. To refresh your memory, the commercial exclusion zone only allowed multifamily. It did not allow retail or restaurant development. Since 2016, this property has been actively on the market. It has most recently been discussed and analyzed as a hotel site. It turned out that 1 acre is difficult to accommodate a hotel. Prior to 2016, the planning board, under the COID bylaw, did approve this site for a 12,000 square foot, 2-story owner-occupied contractor yard. If you drive by the site today, you'll see that it's been excavated. Building permits were pulled for the foundation of that contractor yard, and then the owner decided to put the property up for sale, which brings us to about a month ago. That commercial broker, along with the property owner and a prospective buyer, approached the town and indicated an interest in pursuing an opportunity such as what you see on the screen here, which is a 5,600 square foot, potentially a multi-tenanted retail restaurant plaza on this 1 acre parcel. So in order to accomplish or to provide this opportunity, this would require a overlay map amendment to remove this 1 acre parcel from the commercial exclusion zone, which would then place it into the general overlay, which allows for retail and restaurant type development.
What is that gonna take, a majority or two-thirds?
It takes 2/3, yep.
2/3.
Motion?
Recommend approval for Article 20 for the town fall meeting warrant.
One moment. Can I just have a few words for your consideration prior to your vote
Sure.
on this article?
Yes.
Thank you. Hi, Chris Bowman, 3 Julio Street, Precinct 4 Rep. I'd like the board to consider that this is spot zoning. the town already voted for the multifamily non-commercial zone to start at this particular point around. The emphasis for the BAOD was for the reuse of the commercial buildings all along Billerica Road. So far, there have been no projects except for late 2017. I think DCU came in for one building on Billerica Road. But everything else is still empty. There's a new project that was approved that takes down trees that's next to residential property instead of going to the commercial reuse areas that are supposed to encourage exactly this type of project. And exactly the type of project that was approved at 197 Billerica Road. So I would like the board to consider that one of the primary reasons for doing the BAOD was to encourage the revitalization along Billerica Road in these specific commercial buildings that are empty. So, and that hasn't been going on. Everything else around it has been going on. So I'd appreciate it if this board would take that into consideration, that this is spot zoning, and it shouldn't be done. It should be encouraged along Billerica Road where the commercial buildings are right now. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Evan, Omniway, how has that gone out there as far as, I mean, that part of the goal was to get 129 sort of alive again. And my understanding is Omniway is at capacity at this point?
Yeah, Omniway via auction was sold, and the new property owner, SVN Parsons, has decided to proceed with re-tenanting to traditional office. They've been very successful, and they are probably beyond 80% leased at this point.
Okay, so there is some filling up of the buildings out there.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening incrementally. There's certainly still several properties that remain a challenge. Via the EDC, staff has been updating EDC. I mean, that's a tough road. The town has been engaged with those property owners even before the overlay. So we're going on over 3 years at this point. So the buildings that have been problematic remain problematic.
And just to, I did a drive-around tour with some state officials on a bus, and we toured the 129 area, and one of the first comments out of the gentleman's mouth was sort of taking in and making notes for the state was, boy, there really are no amenities out here. When you said there were none, you weren't kidding. And I think, his comment sort of underscores why you have this issue. And then you go to this piece of land that we're talking about now, and it really is basically, you have this huge housing development and the entryway and a hole in the ground that's been dug out. So I can't really imagine what someone's going to want to do with that other than what you're proposing. And I'd hate to see it just left vacant because it just looks awful in front of a new development and so forth. So
If it was a new hotel, if up on the hill it was a hotel, that would be a restaurant right there to cater to those travelers.
yeah, and, I mean, I appreciate Chris Bowman's comments, but my worry is that if we don't do something, it's just going to sit there empty and look. It sets a tone for as you enter that area of town.
Yeah,
It's right at the corner.
Yeah.
It's evolved to be a little bit more than that. Now that we're almost 3 years past 2016, when the original BAOD overlay map was created. As I mentioned the history of this particular parcel, but simultaneously the town has been engaged with existing businesses in that kind of quadrant of Mill Road, and they are obviously many of the other businesses they are interested in having amenities within close walking proximity. The former Lifelinks building is now vacant. That property owner has been made aware of this zoning amendment and doesn't have any concerns. Obviously, it's a complementary amenity to the 108 rental units at Princeton at Mill. And then the final piece of this puzzle, which is fairly new, is analog devices. Within the next 2 to 3 years, we'll be transitioning out of Chelmsford and into Wilmington. So you can see that the overlay, while one of the initial strategies, as Ms. Bowman indicated, was reuse of existing vacant square footage, one of the original strategies was also new construction via vacant land. And it's quite obvious to those involved that the quickest path to market is new construction on vacant land. So 197 Billerica Road takes care of that across the street from Apollo. That's about 3/4 of a mile away from the highway interchange. This 1 acre parcel, while it's small in scope and scale, does provide the town an opportunity to potentially get a small but meaningful, likely a meaningful amenity node on this side of the industrial park. And at this point, every little bit would help, because much like filling up those vacant buildings, finding locations for amenities and developers who want to build amenities in this park also remains somewhat of a challenge.
Any other discussion, questions? Motion?
I will recommend approval for Article 20 for the fall town meeting warrant.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That completes the board's recommendations on all 23 warrant articles.
Next item is sign the warrant for the 2008 state election.
Yes, with the November 6th is the 2018 state election, highlighted by the governor's race and so forth, ballot questions. You need to formally approve and sign the warrant for the conduction of the state election, and they've already got dates out for early voting and so forth. So, so that would be the action under this agenda item.
When is the deadline to register to vote, do you know?
Yes, I just.
'Cause I know we won't have a meeting before then.
Yeah, I just saw that on the town's website. Let me just hang on 1 second. It's right.
On the 17th?
The early voting begins on October 22nd. The deadline, I thought, was in that same notice.
It's 20 days ahead, so whatever that would be around this.
Same release. Okay. Yeah, it'd be 20 days prior to that, so it's Wednesday. Let's pull the calendar up.
Begins on the 22nd. It would
It'd be Wednesday, the
tomorrow.
17th
Okay.
of October.
20 days before.
20 days, yeah.
November 2nd.
Yeah, November 6th is the election, and then
Oh, I see. So, and
November
then early
17th.
voting begins on the 22nd.
November
Right.
17th.
Okay, thank you.
Are they going to permit early voting?
Yes, the early voting dates begin on October 22nd. They go from 8:30 a.m. to 4 p.m. Here at the town offices, and then they will have special evening hours and Saturday hours. So Saturday, October 27th, the town offices will be open 9 to 1, the town clerk's office, and then Thursday, November 1st until 7 p.m. for early voting. So again, I'm sure there'll be a lot of publicity as we get nearer to it in both the local and state level, because there was no early voting for the primary election, but there will be for the November election.
We'll see some social media reminders from the
Yes.
town about that.
Yeah, it's already posted, it's already out there, it's on the front page of our website, it's been put out on Facebook, and so forth, and you'll see that just continue to be promoted.
So we're just signing the warrant?
Yes, approving and signing the warrant for the election.
We need a, yeah, we
I
need
need a
vote.
motion
Yeah.
to approve the warrant for the
Second.
election.
All those in favor? Aye. 5-0.
And then the next article is to sign the warrant for the special town meeting that will be held on Thursday, October 18th. And this is a one-article warrant. It was it arose in the last 4 weeks since the following town meeting was signed, and it has to do with the definition of lot size. And I wish Evan hadn't departed it a minute ago, but I'll try to do my best to explain it. What we're doing is we're adding clarifying language that's been drafted by town council. This arose after a recent matter came in regarding the development on Hillsworth Avenue in terms of what the definition of lot area is. And it had to do with the whole issue of the straight lines and computing the minimum lot area. And so we've added a sentence to clarify this to assist in future issues that may come before the planning board. And so for the purpose of, the added language is for the purpose of commuting the 150-foot minimum distance, the length of each lot line shall be added together irrespective of whether the two lines intersect. You see the diagram that's shown. So basically I put the entire existing bylaw, including the diagram, so that people hopefully can explain and understand what's taking place here, but I'm sure it goes the other way, Mike. So what's happening is that on those irregular shaped lots, that's what's taking place here in order to determine conformity for lot size. And the planning, because you're signing the warrant, the planning board has not held its hearing yet, but it's been presented to them at this point in time. But because of the legal advertising requirements, their hearing is not until a week from Wednesday. But again, this was originated from town council in consultation with the building commissioner in order to provide clarity to the existing bylaw. So it's not meant to be a substantive change. It's meant to be a clarifying change.
And anybody who's applied under using the old standard will be grandfathered?
Oh, yeah, exactly, yeah. What's out there is approved, yeah.
I will make a motion. I will recommend approval.
Well, first we need
Before you
to.
gotta move to sign the warrant, motion to sign the
I will
warrant
make a motion to sign the warrant.
for the
Second.
special town meeting on
Special town
Thursday,
meeting,
October
yep,
18th.
October 18th, 2018.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Does the board wish to take a position on the article so that we can, or you'd have to meet at
I'm
town
ready
meeting?
to vote if you want to make a motion.
I mean, it just
If
seems
you
like,
didn't support it, you wouldn't sign the warrant, I guess,
Right?
in that sense, yeah.
it just seems like something that needs to be done. It's just clarifying language. Like, that's great. Let's vote.
You need a.
Recommend approval. Did it make a motion or? is
Yeah,
it-
motion to recommend approval, yeah.
Motion to recommend approval for the special warrant.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
5-0.
Thank you. Mr.
Town
Chairman.
manager reports.
Yeah, real quickly, I sort of covered it in the review of warrant articles. On September 9th, an arbitration award was issued regarding the collective bargaining agreement between the town and the patrol officers. We went through it earlier. You've recommended approval. It's available on, in the packet. In essence, as we stated, the arbitrator met with the parties, heard all the positions, and then came down with a 5-point ruling. Again, the patrol officers will now be compensated for a 40-hour work week as opposed to 37, even though there's no change in schedule. So if they worked a 7 to 3 shift, for example, a regular work week is 37 and a half hours. That work week will now be paid at 40 hours. And where this came from was the arbitrator looked at the evidence from both sides, and there was a majority of comparable communities that actually had the 40-hour compensation. So he awarded that. What that amounts to, if somebody gets paid for 40 hours where it was 37 and a half, amounts to a 6 2/3% increase in compensation. just do the math, 40 divided by 37
They
and a
still
half.
work 37 and a half.
Well, they still work that 8-hour block. They now get paid for the full 8 hours. Very similar to what we do in this building. We're here for 8 hours, but we get paid for 7 and a half.
They
So
get
they
paid
will-
for lunch.
They get paid for lunch, in essence.
Yeah, they're getting paid for
while they're. So that becomes effective January 1st, 2019, upon ratification and funding by town meeting. Wages, again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a 0.5% increase effective the beginning of each of the fiscal years of the agreement. So July 1, 2016 is a 0.5% increase in the compensation schedule. Then that gets, on top of that, becomes another 0.5, July 1 of 17 and July 1 of 18. And as we mentioned earlier, the shift differential increases from $1.73 per hour for the second and third shift to $2 per hour. And as I mentioned earlier, the firearms training is now be addressed as compensatory time as opposed to paid overtime, and the light duty matter, will be sent out for a resolution. It looks like that'll get done. There just needed to be the parties wanted to get together and work to clarify the language, so. So that's the report on the arbitration award for the Patrol Officers Union. And then Mike's got a quick update regarding disposition of 101 Mill Road.
Paul, before you jump to
Yeah,
that,
go
can you just clarify the gun training is now, it was being paid as overtime?
Yes.
And now is?
Be a compensatory time.
Okay.
So instead of getting paid time and a half, they get time off. So that was sort of a financial give back to the town.
Okay.
So, okay.
Again, Mr. Chairman, what you have in your packet is a sample of the email that I sent out to several of the people that contacted me over the summer. Although we had no bidders, as you recall, in the first 3 attempts to sell 101 Mill Road, one of the collateral benefits was we had a for sale sign that was left up after the 3rd bid accidentally and generated a lot of interest. People came in days after the last bid, probably in the order of a dozen or more, including some local developers, and some people have had some serious interest. And before we even put the RFP out, we had 2 people that came in and brought in their own engineers and architects. So we have some people that are seriously interested in it. We had a walk-in today, and I've had quite a few people download the RFP online. So it was sent out back on September 19th. I haven't had any real questions, but I've had some requests for documents, and I've told anybody I'm happy to provide anything over and above this that anybody needs. We'll start showings and have a pre-bid meeting next week, and all bids are due back on the 23rd. But based on the interaction I've had with a handful of individuals, I'm very optimistic we're going to get somebody bidding on this, or perhaps more than one this time.
This is more than 40,000 square feet, right?
Yeah, it's 40,839.
Great place.
Great place for
Put it
chickens.
right back to the farm.
You just love bringing that up.
Okay, thank you. That's my report for this evening. And I do have one appointment. I'm seeking the board's confirmation of the appointment of Jennifer Hardy to be a non-voting associate member of the Council on Aging for a 3-year term expiring June 30th, 2021.
Do we have a motion?
Make a motion to approve Jen Hardy in the non-voting associate member for the 3-year term of the Council of Aging ending in June 30th, 2021.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. 5-0. We have one set of minutes tonight, and that's the Board of Selectmen Executive Session Minutes, 7/23/18. Does anyone have any comments concerning them? So do we have a motion?
That was the night we had the 2 sessions.
I know, just looking at them. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 23rd, 2018 executive session
And they can be released.
Be released.
to be released.
To be
I
released?
think they can be released, yeah, there's nothing.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
5-0. We have Selectmen and Liaison Reports and Referrals. Pat, do you have anything?
I do. First of all, our newest Eagle Scout is Neil Graham. He achieved Eagle Scout designation a couple of weeks ago, so congratulations to Neil. I want to thank everybody who came to the Friends of the Library book sale a couple of weeks ago. They made over $24,000 from selling books at 50 cents and $1 a piece. So thanks for everybody for picking up all their books for their winter reading. And then you can bring them back and we'll sell them
They
again.
have to take away many? It sounds like, must have been all of it.
Oh, there's always a lot left. I mean,
Was there?
it really
I know
is.
they had a very aggressive sale planned at the end.
Yes, well, yeah, that's true. Also want to congratulate two of us new patrol officers in town, Riley O'Keefe and Kaylee Wan. They graduated not last Friday, the Friday before, right? A little over a week ago from the police academy, and they have started on duty at patrolling the town, so congratulations to them. And also, I just want to mention, last night, the Board of Health conducted the fifth overdose vigil on the town common. Very moving ceremony. Kerry Sorrentino, the public health nurse, conducted the ceremony. They had a guest speaker who talked about losing her daughter at age 18, and it was amazing to me how she talked about her daughter going from a wonderful, bright student to being just hooked on drugs in just a matter of weeks, and just lost her so tragically. And fortunately, the Chief Spinney was there, and he said incidences like that are going down in town, but still, even one is too many to have. So, like I said, it was a good ceremony, and I'm glad that they do that every year to bring visibility to that that situation in town and just in general.
Thank you. Ken?
Just an update on the tree committee / Chelmsford Open Space. They've, the purple beech that they spliced off before it was cut down has actually, the two that they have left have grown. And it looks like they're getting ready for planting.
Babies?
Well, bigger than babies. They're about 6 feet tall now. So one, they're looking at Sunny Meadows and one at Garrison House, and they're going to be building some surrounds of them to protect them from rabbits, deer, whatever else. I don't know if people remember, we had 20 to start, and some bunnies got to the baby ones and took out 18, so we're down to the last two. So we really need these last two to make it. So that was good. They Phil Stanway and Jim Martin came together and walked the properties and figured out where I think they're going to put them. And so hopefully we'll be able in a couple of years take some more splicings off them and generate some more trees.
Is that the only way to propagate purple beeches?
Well, it's of genetic significance to the town because
Oh,
it's
I see.
original from the mother tree.
Okay.
There are purple beeches you can buy, but this is a Chelmsford purple beech. So it is. I don't know if that's
Not really a Chelmsford purple
well.
beech. You can
There's
call it
One
that.
that was from on the common. That was the
but there was a question about at some point Jim had said there could have been a trademark on the name. I don't know. He got into it deep, and I was like,
By a high school, right, Class Becken,
Yeah.
yeah,
early 1900s.
yeah. It was actually
Were you
planted by
there,
Chelmsford High
George?
School.
It was a year after I graduated.
But they are, I think, planning on having a high school class plant the next ones. So just to continue the pattern.
George, anything?
Nothing. Thank you.
Nothing.
Okay, I don't have anything tonight. Do we have any press questions? No, not tonight, okay. We have an executive session, so I guess we need a motion to adjourn and reconvene,
Motion to adjourn, not to reconvene.
to reconvene.
How would we reconvene?
You're not coming back.
Oh, we are.
We are?
We are.
For what?
For what? Yeah.
Oh, no,
We're
we're
not
not.
going to come back to open session, right?
No,
Not to reconvene.
not to reconvene.
For discuss strategy with respect to negotiations with the police superior officers or sergeants union. You have to state the reason for the executive session.
Second.
It has to be a roll call vote.
All those in favor?
You have to be a
Roll call.
Oh, Pat?
Aye.
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 It'll be real quick. It's already 10 after 10.
And will we be having our,
Already
that
2
additional
hours.
meeting, do you feel, before town
At
meeting?
this point, no. Barring the unforeseen, I don't think we'll need to meet at town, prior to town meeting.
You throw that in there?
Hey, John.
Oh, I gotta get my coat.
We gotta go in there.
I can't go in.
You gotta go find the chickens?
No, my son's detail pay is based on the sergeant's contract, so I can't.